The modern example that people are following is they have issues with their health and they immediately think it's about diet and exercise. And yet they're unaware of this basic fact that mitochondria are the engines in our cells which process our food. There are so many factors that influence mitochondrial health besides diet and exercise. And one of the biggest ones is light. The least natural light during the day and the most artificial light at night had significant increases of every mental illness, anxiety, depression, schizophrenia.
That ultimately led to the development of this product that I'm wearing right now.
Blue light glasses block generally less than 5% of the harmful range of blue light. Clear lenses are really ineffective for the significant biological effects that I was going for.
You said that you had originally had this biohacker-esque line of thought with respect to sunlight, but now you've taken a different stance.
I definitely overdid it on my sun exposure over the years. We should take advantage of the benefits of sunlight and also be moderate and not overdo it. We're literally sitting in an environment which is damaging the retina, aging our eyes, aging our skin. In the artificial modern lights, you don't have UV light, but you have a lot of high energy visible blue light. The good news is we have been developing the solution for really a long time.
All right, everyone. We are starting with my boy, Matt Maruca, discussing his dating life.
Yeah.
But now we're going into where he's spent the most time.
Yeah, so I have this app, which if it ever loads, it seems to not want to work for me whenever I want it to work, but tracks my days so that I can just make sure I'm, being careful about, residence, tax residence, all these types of things. So if it decides to work, I'll read you the days I've been everywhere this year.
But Indonesia is the primary?
Indonesia is the longest I've been anywhere. I really like Bali. So it's really just Bali, nowhere else in Indonesia. It's a super special island. Most people have heard of it as a really cool touristy place, spiritual place. It's different from the rest of Indonesia in that it's a Hindu island. So they descend from people who, I guess, left India and brought their Hindu beliefs, but it has certain, pagan elements. So it's not like traditional Indian Hinduism, but the people are just super friendly. Like they're some of the most friendly people I've ever met. Every morning they light these things called offerings, just a little offering with some food, some flowers, and some incense. Everywhere you go, every restaurant, every house, like every Airbnb I stay at, the cleaner will light one every day, sort of to like protect me from evil spirits.
That's cool.
So that energy is in everything. It's just in the way that people treat you, the service. I mean, there are a lot of impatient, entitled Westerners who go there and they still get treated well. And I think that's kind of why it works. I think a lot of other places that people might not be so humble to accept that kind of treatment, but they're just like, whatever, And so it's a really nice place. And I like it. I like to surf. I like to play tennis. I like to run in the rice fields. I like to, there's just so many cool people. There's great restaurants and cafes. I explain it to people like, imagine if, you had a whiteboard. Well, every city, I think of every city that modern cities and everywhere people go, it's the product of certain thought forms, right? So for example, if you go to Philadelphia where I was raised, it started with, Native Americans and then the settlers and then kind of a colonial society and then eventually industrial and then kind of a modern corporate business type society. So you have some skyscrapers, you have the old town with the old brick colonial houses. And that's the result of the thought forms of the evolving technology and times. And so now the people's life today is directly affected and even driven in many respects by the thought forms of old, of the way that things were built. And now people inhabit this city that was created then. But in Bali, it was all just rice fields for the most part, other than the little villages. And so you have all these young people, like mostly in their 20s and 30s, who go there and decide they love it, over the last couple of decades, largely surfers from Australia and then from all over the world, and then spiritual people and whatnot. And so starting from scratch, what's built in Bali is the direct reflection of what people want now, not what people needed 30 or 40 or 100 years ago. And so all you have are healthy restaurants, amazing coffee shops, like world-class restaurants, unbelievable coffee shops. I don't even drink a lot of coffee, but it's crazy. And you have, for example, within a couple mile radius of where I stay normally, a town called Canggu. Have you heard of paddle, this racket sport, which is taken over? It's not pickleball.
No.
Okay, so it's like a mini tennis with a kind of thicker racket, and there's glass walls, kind of like squash, and the ball bounces off the walls. It's a whole thing. It's called paddle. Some people call it padel, but it's
really?
paddle.
I've never heard of this.
It's from Spain. It started in Mexico, but anyway, it's huge. It's like way bigger than pickleball everywhere in the world except the US. Only the US plays pickleball.
Really?
Yeah. It's called paddle.
I've never heard of this.
So, and they have like 20 paddle courts or even more, just like within a 1 mile radius. Like it's huge. And there's tons of BJJ and Muay Thai and all this stuff. So it's like a Never Everland and Peter Pan in a way. It's like where young people just go and they want to stay because it's unbelievable. So I'm kind of like spoiling the secret, although it's already spoiled. But so that's why I like to stay there.
Yeah.
It's very hot. So the tropics kind of bring me down a little bit because it gets so hot. So if this thing decides to load, which nope, it's not really helping.
Okay.
In
of
Bali,
course.
But so Bali's the place that I really like. I will tell you because it's really funny.
What else though? Like I know you spent a lot of time in Europe.
I spent a lot of time in Europe. I really like everywhere in Europe. This is the perpetual issue because people are like, oh, I'm like, I live in Europe kind of. And they're like, where? I'm like, well, kind of everywhere, So for example, I really like Albania. I really like Albania, especially because at least I think this is why I like it. It was a super communist country until, 30 years ago. It was like the North Korea of the world. The dictator named Enver Hoxha, he died in the 80s and then it kind of crumbled. And then the people had never been exposed to like free market capitalism. So then a huge portion of the people lost nearly all of their money through some Ponzi schemes in like the early 2000s. And so it's just coming out of, that whole situation effectively, 10, 20 years later. And it just feels to me like a bit of a bastion of sense. Like the people just feel sensible because it's like, we don't want any more of that. Like we understand what big government does. So it feels very free.
That's why I like Serbia. Have you been to Serbia?
I actually lived in the Serbian part of Bosnia for a year in high school. So yeah, I speak Serbian.
You speak Serbian?
Yeah, I learned their language because I lived there in high
Serbian
school.
And I don't even speak
you are?
Serbian.
Let's go. That's amazing.
I don't even speak
Huge
it at all.
respect. Yeah, you're Serbian. That's dope.
Yeah, my last name's a Serbian last name. So Zek, before it was Americanized, was Zec, which means rabbit in Serbian.
Wow. Okay. Good stuff.
So random. Random fun fact.
That's cool. Okay, I got my day count here. Finally, this happened.
Okay, let's hear it.
So I was in Indonesia this adds up to like 325 or whatever days we are into this year so far. So 77 days in Indonesia, 41 days in the United States. That's grown 6 or 7 in the past week. 26 days in Albania, 25 days in Italy, 22 days in Spain, 18 days in Switzerland, which is also one of my favorite. 14 days in Germany with my scientific advisor, Dr. Wunsch, who we'll talk about. 12 days in the United Kingdom for Wimbledon and a lot of tennis players using our glasses. Croatia, 10 days, amazing place. 10 days in France, 9 days in Georgia, 8 days in Greece, 8 days in Mexico, 7 days in Costa Rica, 6 days in Armenia, 4 days in Austria, 4 days in Malaysia, 3 days in Estonia, 3 in Turkey, 2 in Bosnia, 2 in Monaco, 1 in the Netherlands, and 1 in Qatar, I guess on like day trips or layovers. It's like 23 countries. It's kind of, but I love it, like I'm loving it. At the same time, yeah, there's stresses on the body of traveling.
Yeah, and I want to talk about all that. Before we get to that, though, you've been on the podcast before, but I still think it'd be appropriate just to start with your journey into wellness and specifically into light and circadian biology. So let's start there.
Yeah, so when I was a kid, I had a variety of health issues that were kind of bringing me down, let's say, mainly gut issues, allergies, and headaches. My mom took me to doctors and the pediatricians told me to take Advil for my headaches. The gastroenterologist told me to take Tums for my gut distress, which was gas, bloating, pain, that I didn't know what was causing it at that time. And then for allergies, the allergist told me to take Zyrtec and Claritin. So I saw a naturopath, put me on like a yeast cleanse. It might have helped a little bit, but it didn't really resolve the symptoms at the core. And then eventually came to high school and the symptoms were just really rough. Like I was, relatively normal kid, I had great friends and I, ran track and field and whatnot, but I'd be experiencing either a headache or gut discomfort or something of the like, allergies, and it just wasn't pleasant. And so I started reading on the internet everything I could about health and wellness. I kind of got this idea, like an intuition that maybe my gut was damaged because I'd eat and I'd have gas and discomfort. So I was like, okay, maybe something's going on, something's wrong. And I came across the paleo diet, which is kind of the opening to this more holistic, natural way of thinking. But I ended up after feeling significant progress, I became convinced that diets were the ultimate solution because I came across a statement on Mark Sisson's blog, the Mark's Daily Apple, which is a wealth of knowledge. And I'm super grateful to him for all his work and all these, early paleo diet authors. But one of the claims was, health is 80% diet and everything else falls in the remaining 20%. So I was like, all right, well, if that's the truth and I fully accepted it, then if I'm plateauing in my progress using diets, it means I just need to be stricter on the diet and more refined. And so I went from the paleo diet to the autoimmune paleo diet, which looks like you're familiar with, to
my wife and I did paleo originally to help heal her autoimmune issues. So yeah.
So paleo autoimmune, then keto, paleo autoimmune, then the GAPS diet, which is like the ultra strict, bone broth primarily. And it came to a point I started this in the beginning of high school, all this research. I was around 13, 14. At this point I was 15 and I was miserable because I had gotten so obsessed about dieting, thinking that if I make one mistake, if I eat the wrong thing, even a morsel of it, it's going to activate my immune system and all that, which could very well be true for somebody with a severe autoimmune disease. But like I had allergies and I was just hyperinflating all of this in my brain that I was like going to die. So basically I made myself far more miserable. Luke enlightened me with the term, it's called orthorexia, when people get so obsessed about their diet that it ends up being like an eating disorder in and of itself, which is so prevalent today. It's like religion in the health and wellness world.
Amongst the wellness community, absolutely.
Yeah, I think it's actually like the sickness community in many cases. Because it's like a mental sickness, like to be so obsessed about something, usually as a distraction from something else in people's lives. But that's a whole different conversation, which we can get into.
Yeah.
So so then I hit a bit of a turning point. It was like almost like eating. It was absolutely eating disorder level. And then I came across the work of Dr. Jack Kruse, actually, this neurosurgeon who people may be familiar with here, who was basically sharing an undiscussed or underdiscussed, at least, topic of health and wellness, of how so many other things influence our biology besides just the food we're consuming. And to his credit, he's done an amazing job, I believe, bringing that information out into the health and wellness sphere. You saw people like, top level health and wellness experts like Ben Greenfield and Mercola and David Asprey sharing this information kind of as a result of Jack's adamancy about this information. And so I'm really grateful for that. So I started to research deeper. I started going to the experts behind this work to try to understand it. And it all just made so much sense to me, when I went and read some of the papers and some of the books. And I also started to feel like, gosh, I spent so much time and so many other people spend so much time trying to fix their health with their diet alone. And yet they suffer and struggle. And yet they're unaware of this basic fact that mitochondria are the engines in our cells which process our food. And the best analogy to explain this is the car analogy. So if somebody is driving, let's say somebody's driving their car down the road one day and it's misfiring and blowing black smoke and they're not able to accelerate. Someone might think, okay, well, let me take it to the gas station and upgrade from the regular fuel I've been using to premium fuel and maybe put in some fuel additives. Maybe it'll run better. So they do that. They drive off and all of a sudden they're still having the same issue. They say, okay, I need to go to the mechanic. The mechanic goes in, opens the engine up and says, okay, something's off. The spark plugs are worn out. You need to replace your spark plugs. There's an issue in the ignition system, deeper than the fuel that's going in. No matter how great the fuel is, it's not going to fix that root issue. And the modern example that people are following is they have issues with their health and they kind of immediately think, okay, it's about diet and exercise because that's what we're being taught. So they eat healthier food, which is like premium fuel and fuel additives, like all the supplements and everything, and it doesn't fix the root issue. So mitochondrial dysfunction is a huge issue. There's a researcher from the city I'm from, Dr. Douglas Wallace from Philadelphia, and he's basically shown, while all of his colleagues, he's now in his 70s, all of his colleagues studied the nuclear genes to try to find the causes of disease in, the nucleus, the genetics we get from mom and dad. But he's been studying the mitochondrial genes because it turns out since mitochondria were formerly their own organism, its own kind of bacteria, they have their own genome, which was left in the mitochondria for the same reason that in building, for example, a power plant, you might after the power plant's constructed in a city, the city planner might keep the overall plans for the parking lot and the structure of the building, but the wiring diagram stays on site. And this is Dr. Douglas Wallace's analogy, actually. The wiring diagram stays on site. And that's the reason that mitochondria maintained a very few limited number of genes. So he's shown now that while his colleagues failed to explain the causes of modern chronic illnesses through nuclear genetic explanations, nearly every modern chronic illness, from diabetes to obesity to heart disease, so the metabolic disorders, to neurodegenerative diseases like Alzheimer's and all these autoimmune diseases, Parkinson's and Hashimoto's and vitiligo and so on, even developmental diseases like autism, have a component of mitochondrial dysfunction at their core. And it makes sense if you think about it. All of these complex biological processes require a lot of energy. And if mitochondria can't make energy well, then the body isn't going to be able to carry out these processes. And kind of like a government that, let's say, relies on a $10 trillion tax base, you cut it to 5, it's going to have to cut expensive programs. And the most expensive programs in the body are the brain and the heart. And it's two of the places we see the most modern disease, Alzheimer's and heart disease. So this was absolutely mind-blowing for me. And one of the things I learned is there are so many factors that influence mitochondrial health besides diet and exercise, or besides diet even, and supplementation and whatnot. And one of the biggest ones is light. And that just totally blew my mind, that just this simple circadian rhythm driven by this body clock that we have is controlling mitochondrial energy production, and especially mitochondrial repair through the power of melatonin, which is a hormone of darkness, which blue light disrupts. And we need to be getting morning sunlight. And all of this just totally blew my mind. I became hyper obsessed. And that's really how I got into this space. And, it led me eventually to starting a company. And then the company had some success and I started traveling and haven't really stopped since then. So that's more or less how I got here.
How old are you?
I'm 26.
26. And how many years ago did you start this company?
8 years ago. So I had just turned 18.
That's crazy.
Yeah. It's been interesting. It's been
probably
interesting
learned a lot.
I think maybe.
Yeah. Oh, dude, you are wise for your age, for sure, man. People say that to me because I'm 33, but
thing is, in today's world, you can't really talk about a lot of wisdom publicly because sometimes, some of it's really not publicly acceptable.
Totally get that.
But anyway, let's see what we can discuss.
Right. Have you ever explored any of that from a water lens, like from a Gerald Pollack fourth phase water lens as well?
Yeah, that was one of the books that really blew my mind. I actually interviewed him for a podcast, and while so a great disclaimer here is I don't claim to be a scientist. I'm not a scientist, although I'd like to think I have a scientific mind and I apply it to almost everything in my life, including my business.
You also have Dr. Wunsch in your back.
Yeah, precisely. That's the thing and that's something I'd love to get into, is the distinction between learning from the online internet blogger biohackers versus now having spent the last 3 years spending probably a week per quarter at Dr. Wunsch's house in Germany and spending a lot of time with him closely. My perspectives have shifted radically on things like sunlight. But all that's to say that I have a lot of this information that I like to share, but I'm not a medical doctor, so it's not medical advice for people. But yes, his work's very significant. One of the fascinating concepts for me is this idea of course, of fourth phase water, that the water in our cells is almost definitely structured water, as he calls it, or easy water,
Ordered.
not your bulk water that you would have in a glass. And that the water gets structured by infrared light, particularly near infrared light. And that happens, it almost seems like it was organized as if by some masterful plan or something, but that's 40% of the light that comes through the atmosphere is near infrared, just near infrared. All the other colors and ultraviolet and violet, red, orange, yellow, green, blue, that's all the other 60%, but just near infrared's 40% of it. And far infrared might even be part of that other 40%. So all that's to say, it's such a critical part of the light spectrum for our health. And another topic we can get into is how the modern indoor environment and modern artificial LED lighting has fully deprived us of the benefits of near infrared light. And it has serious implications for our skin and also our eyes and our health and mitochondria.
Let's start there, man, on the artificial light environment, because that ultimately led to the development of this product that I'm wearing right now, which, shameless plug, we'll talk about that quite a bit during this episode. Let's start with the artificial light environment that we've created for ourselves.
Yeah, so artificial light was, I think, a very ingenious invention in many ways because it allowed us to see in the dark. Prior to artificial light, people used fire, candles, fire in all of its forms, torches, gas lamps, and so on. But those consume a lot of fuel and they can obviously create fires, which is a big problem in cities. So with evolving technology to be able to move electricity across a wire and power a tungsten filament to create a beautiful light spectrum, it made a lot of sense. And the original artificial lights, incandescent lights, were actually really decent. They have very low blue light, which means two things. So we're going to split the blue light spectrum in half for everybody right now. Below 450 nanometers, we have what we would call HEVL, high energy visible light. And this spectrum of light is let's call it little sister of ultraviolet A. So it's very powerful. It has the capacity to cause physical damage to the eyes, to the skin, and over extended periods of exposure, which everybody has today in offices and on screens. Those what seems like an insignificant amount of blue light relative to the sheer intensity of sunlight actually can become significant. You're under this light 10, 14, 16 hours a day. People are staring at it directly into their eyes. So this half of the blue light spectrum is below 450 nanometers is this HEVL. And then above 450 nanometers, we would call circadian blue. Now it's with a peak at 480. So there's kind of a good blue light, or at least blue light that's good during the day. And at night is not exactly desirable because it will trick our brain to thinking it's daytime when it's not, but we'll get into that. And then there's what we could call more bad blue light, which is generally never really beneficial, but creates, for example, the production of reactive oxygen species. That's part of the damaging mechanism I was talking about. So regular incandescent light bulbs, they have very little of the bad blue light, HEVL, and also very little of the circadian stimulating blue, especially relative to the rest of the light spectrum. So if you measure it, you see from the blue up to the red, it's just kind of continuous increase in intensity up to the red, and then near infrared, then far infrared. And so these bulbs, they follow what's called the black body radiation curve, or the Planckian curve, which is typical of fire and the sun. And for example, Brian Richards, I think you know, he created this amazing company. He's a good friend of mine and a guy in the health and wellness space. He created a company called Sauna Space.
Oh, I have a Sauna Space. Okay.
So they leverage incandescent lamps with this beautiful curve, which is very characteristic of fire. You know, I believe they call their bulbs the firelight bulb or something like this.
I was about to cuss right there. That thing gets hot.
It's an amazing spectrum, and it's really healthy, and it contains, again, very well, and they've even added a red glass cover so that all the chronobiologically active or circadian stimulating wavelengths are filtered, so you can use it at night without any issue, because it does get quite intense if they didn't filter it. You know, like a regular incandescent bulb is significantly less intense than those. I think those are several, like 100 watt plus or something.
Yeah, they're wild. And I have 7 of them inside my Sauna Space.
Yeah, so I was in one at the conference in West Palm last week, and I was dripping and sweating.
Dude,
15 minutes.
Drip immediately. Yeah. Like most saunas, you have to wait like 10, 20 minutes for them to heat up. This one's like instant.
It's amazing. I love it. So anyway, this is the black body radiation curve. And this is kind of characteristic of natural light sources that we've been exposed to. So incandescent lights are great for this. They have very high color rendering, which means the way you perceive all the colors, the food you're eating, the paintings you look at, the people you look at. That's a very important one. When people look at themselves in a mirror, you go into a nice, like a boutique hotel, or, some places in the Swiss Alps, for example, I've been, or many hotels, you see the incandescent light bulb reflecting on your face, and you feel like, I look good. I look alive. Because you see the blush in your cheeks, the blood flow under your skin. That's what healthy, high color rendering, broad spectrum light sources are designed to do. And that's how people look in daylight and under firelight and under incandescent lamps. So they have all sorts of benefits, high color rendering, and they flicker, but not much, because once the filament gets so hot, it's almost imperceptible and not tremendously significant. So incandescent lights are good. In fact, they're great for an artificial light. Where we started to go wrong, I believe, was with fluorescents and this kind of advent of this green agenda. So they wanted more environmental efficiency. Fluorescent lights have a terrible spectrum, and they actually were phased out because people realized how bad they were. It's just that LED technology hadn't quite evolved yet to the point where it was basically viable at scale. So fluorescents, if you look at them, they have a very narrow band spectrum, and I'll actually send some pictures that we could include like in the show notes for people to look at, or could be cut in here. But basically very, very narrow band emissions of specific, and it's mercury vapor. This is an interesting one I learned from Dr. Wunsch. So all atoms in nature absorb and re-emit specific wavelengths of light. And they are excited by, or sort of activated by, those wavelengths of light which they absorb and re-emit, because if they absorb it, it has the power to change something in the electrons of that atom. So if somebody has mercury toxicity, if they have a lot of mercury in their body sitting under fluorescent lamps, because it's mercury vapor in the lamps. They inject electricity into this lamp, which is why if you break one, you have to be careful with it. They inject electricity in, and then the mercury absorbs the electricity and then fluoresces it out. And that's what creates the light that we see. So the emission curves of a mercury vapor lamp or fluorescent lamp are the exact wavelengths necessary to activate latent mercury in the body. And so people under fluorescent lights who have mercury toxicity are being basically screwed.
Wow.
Stimulated in a negative way. It's a really interesting thing. So fluorescent lamps are a big problem. They flicker. You can sometimes see them flicker if they're messed up. But
absolutely. I used to hate that in high school and middle school. And
it's terrible. No, it's so bad. So then LED technology, they got the blue LED. They nailed the blue LED. So they were able to make white light with LEDs, and then LEDs quickly took over. And the predominant focus in indoor artificial lighting is basically energy efficiency and just illumination, total brightness. So they're thinking, how can we get the maximum amount of brightness and human stimulation? So we need some light in that blue range for the least amount of electricity. So it's basically the equivalent of saying, if you were tasked with feeding the masses, saying, how can we get people the maximum amount of calories for the least amount of money? And you'd pretty much just shovel sugar down everybody's throat all day, because you can produce the maximum amount of calories, most likely from something like sugar cane or wheat flour, with zero nutrient, highly processed, zero nutrient density. I mean, at least it starts good and you have to process it to get there. Like the artificial light is just bad from the start now. So they're using the cheapest possible LEDs. So you have extremely low color rendering index, which means you don't see things the way they actually are, and people look bad, people look pale, and it actually affects people's psyche and self-confidence massively, which I believe is really significant, especially in today's world where everybody's comparing, with everybody else. Just try it. If anybody has a chance to see themselves in an incandescent light, you can hardly get them anymore, but you'll be like, wow, I look kind of good, Anyway, and it's good. So the problem with the LEDs, modern LEDs, is they have really low CRI. They're super blue enriched. And the blue peak for modern LEDs is right around 450 nanometers, which, back to the splitting between good and bad blue light, it sits right in the middle. So it's the perfect range of light. And I don't think this was intentional, although the conspiracy theory folks might, that it's the perfect range to cause physical damage to the retina and also to the skin, so eyes and skin. And it has a huge impact on our chronobiological system, our circadian rhythm, in other words. And so this blue light during the day, it's jacking up and overstressing people's production of cortisol, which, side note, cortisol is a glucocorticoid hormone. I learned this from Wunsch too. It puts sugar into the muscles. Cortisol helps to mobilize sugar to your muscles so you can do stuff.
Yeah.
When you're sitting inside all day, how much sugar do you need in your muscles to do stuff? Not a lot, right? And yet people are there's this idea called human-centric lighting, which is like, oh, we're going to have the light change and increase in the blue content throughout the day to jack up people's hormonal system so that they can, be more focused and active.
Dude.
But this is a problem. I got you.
So wild, because I was thinking that I was listening to you on another interview earlier this morning, and y'all didn't mention this, but I thought it immediately. I'm like, when we're thinking about, how do I put this? The crony capitalistic society that we live in, because I'm a big free market capitalist, but we don't live in true capitalism. Yeah, we don't live in true capitalism at all. If you wanted productive workers working a corporate job, you would mess with the light environment to this degree. And this sounds like, whether it was intentional or not, I don't know, but this sounds like the perfect recipe for that.
No, I think it's intentional, and I don't think it was intentional for a negative cause. I think it's just misunderstanding.
Intentional but not nefarious necessarily.
Yeah, exactly. Okay. Intentional but not nefarious. So when you have human-centric lighting, the main point there is that Dr. Wunsch and I, our thesis is that indoor lighting should be hormonally neutral. So you should not be attempting to jack up everybody's stress hormones. Now, bioindividuality is a great concept in health and wellness, and we support bio-individual increasing of the hormonal system. So that's why we created a lens called Blue Sync, which I'd be happy to talk about, which allows anybody to shift the balance of the light spectrum towards the circadian stimulating good blue light while still filtering out the harmful blue light. The problem with these lights, so you get extra stimulation during the day, and at night's a whole separate issue because that's even way worse, but just during the day, unnecessary overstimulation of the hormonal system. Dr. Wunsch describes it as a contraindication. Like, there are medical contraindications. So anything that basically modifies biology for a certain intended effect is by definition a medical device and should be treated accordingly. If somebody has high blood pressure, for example, which a ton of people do, having an increase in their cortisol through artificial light stimulation is a terrible idea. It's known that increased stress, especially for people who are already predisposed to stress and have high blood pressure, can increase the risk, and does, of like nearly every single disease, chronic illnesses and so on, reduced immunity and so on. So that's the risk of constant overstimulation with blue enriched LEDs during the day, which again was not really the case with these natural black body radiation curve following lights like incandescents and halogens. Not that they're perfect, but they were much better. Then the other issue with the modern indoor LEDs is you have so much HEVL, short wavelength blue light. So you're also causing physical damage to the eyes. So you're jacking up the hormonal system, you're physically damaging the eyes. So problems with indoor artificial lights, really low color rendering, very, very poor spectral quality, huge amount of both hormonally overstimulating and physically damaging bad blue light, flicker, which has been shown. So even like very subconscious flicker. Why? Because the manufacturers just don't care to take it out because it just costs a little bit more money in the electrical circuitry. That's all. It's totally possible.
When I was talking to Tristan about this, like if you had an OLED screen on your phone, it wouldn't have as much of the flicker. But it doesn't. Like your phone's one of the worst sources for the flicker.
Yeah, it's a serious issue.
I may have gotten the terminology incorrect on that, but I think I'm right.
So it causes also, I mean, there are limited studies on all of this stuff because who's going to fund the studies? But there is evidence to show, scientific evidence, that flicker causes sort of even migraines, issues in neurology, because we're used to kind of this stable light. And even though we don't visibly perceive the flicker, it's kind of going like this in the background, agitating the sensors and the brainwaves. I mean, our brain, we know that the brain works on different sort of alpha wave and beta brainwave patterns. And these flicker frequencies are very, let's say, incongruent or disharmonious with our body's brain's proper function and the body. So we have low color rendering, too much bad blue light and overstimulating blue light, and tons of flicker. And last but not least, but to make it all a lot worse, we have zero near infrared. So near infrared was removed because with this green agenda push, the idea was that, okay, well, light is just something that we see. So we just need maximum illumination for cheap. And the less, it kind of serves two purposes, so it's cheaper. It also uses less electricity, just like junk food takes less energy and less electricity to make and less money. Same with artificial lighting. Junk light costs less money and takes less electricity. And so near infrared, non-visible wavelength, it's a non-visible range of light, was considered to be irrelevant from the perspective of indoor illumination because you don't see it. So what good does it have? Well, it turns out, as we discussed earlier, in respect to Dr. Gerald Pollack and his research on the fourth phase of water in cells, and so much other research besides his, that near infrared has critical effects on cellular water and its structure, which the implications of which we're really only beginning to understand. But also a big one is mitochondrial energy production. Just earlier, we got through talking about how, or I got through sharing Dr. Douglas Wallace's research on how mitochondrial dysfunction is basically at the crux of every modern chronic illness. And so we've literally transitioned into an indoor environment where we have tons of blue light, which increases reactive oxygen species in our cells, particularly in the surfaces, the eyes and the skin, because the blue doesn't go that deep. But then we're also being totally deprived of this healing near infrared, which does go all the way through the skin, which we're designed to basically have all the time. There's a study from, I believe it's Dr. Glenn Jeffries, who basically showed recently that near infrared can penetrate all the way through the torso and even has improvements on eyesight. It's like, how did that happen? Like everything's kind of interconnected. But anyway, so we're lacking beneficial near infrared in modern artificial lights. And they're actually in vivo live video analyses of cells. So you have cells exposed to basically just near infrared, and then near infrared plus blue light and just blue light. So there's kind of a control there. And they tag the mitochondria with a certain type of red dye, which you can see under a microscope. And the more of the red dye that you see, the more it means they're a healthy, active mitochondria producing energy. So when they shine just the near infrared on the cells, they see, okay, the cells are alive and active. When they shine just the blue light, they see that the cells are basically being killed by the blue light because it's increasing reactive oxygen species production, and the cells are not part of an organism. They're isolated. They just start dying. They add back the near infrared, and it's almost like the blue light isn't even there. So it literally protects from the effects of short wavelength light. And in the sun, yeah, UV light, A, B, and even short wavelength blue light are physically damaging. And in excess, I think it's a bad idea to get too much sun. I mean, that's something that's changed in my perspective since working more closely with Dr. Wunsch compared to the kind of extreme biohacker standpoint where I started. But there's so much near infrared in the sun that there is a protection against the UVA and blue light. In the artificial modern lights, yeah, you don't have UV light, but you have a lot of high energy visible blue light, this powerful bad blue, as I was calling it. and none of the near infrared to counterbalance it. So we're literally sitting in an environment which is damaging the retina, aging our eyes, aging our skin, and also the phones which people are staring into constantly. So the good news is we've been developing the solution for really a long time. Since I started the company, the mission was to switch into lighting. I mean, the glasses will remain because until we've literally changed all the lighting in the world, which is, I think, a 10, 20, 30 year project, the glasses will have significant relevance, and they allow people to experience the science and the principle in reality and practice before somebody might want to go and invest in light bulbs for their whole house. But we've actually just reached the end of the development process of what we call the incandescent LED, which is an LED which basically mimics the incandescent spectrum. It's even in some respects better. I'm careful about saying better because it's hard to beat the incandescent lamp and fire and whatnot. But the one truth of the energy efficiency concern is that far infrared, which we feel as heat, near infrared we really don't quite feel as heat. Far infrared is less biologically relevant, we could say, than near infrared. Not totally irrelevant, but it's good for heating. Like a far infrared sauna will heat you up and you'll sweat, but it doesn't have the biological relevance of near infrared on the mitochondria and water and so on. So the incandescent LED, as we call it, and it's not a shape of a bulb or it's a specific type of LED. So I actually posted about it and somebody's like, no, Philips already or General Electric already has an incandescent LED. I'm like, no. And they showed me a picture of their incandescent looking bulb with LEDs. Now that's an LED incandescent. Right. It's an incandescent replica with an LED filament that's super shitty, low color rendering index, tons of flicker, tons of bad blue, et cetera, et cetera. Too bright and very I'm at these beautiful places in Bali at night, but they have these chain link strings of these bad incandescents. But anyway, what we've created, it's the incandescent LED. It's a little LED and we can package it in frosted bulbs, in filament bulbs. That's going to take a little longer, but we're getting there. In LED strips, in floodlights, in street lights, and car lights. I keep thinking of the Kanye West song, All of the Lights. Yeah. It was one of my favorite songs as a kid, and I'm looking back like, it all makes sense now. But anyway, so we have the solution. It's coming in January. The incandescent LED.
That is epic, dude.
Artificial light indoors is a problem. So just tying this all together to the story you asked about in the beginning, when I learned all this stuff as a 16-year-old, I was like, they're out to kill us. Like the world's trying to kill us. I don't really think it's nefarious. Honestly, I think it's just maybe to some extent, there's some in some places it's not even intentionally nefarious, but maybe it's an anti-human kind of agenda, which we could get into.
Totally. Well, at the very least, you could say, because I think about this when it comes to virologists and doctors, because that's my typical area of focus when I'm invited to speak on things, that they unfortunately accepted unproven premises regarding biology, regarding various aspects of health and how disease manifests. And because they've accepted these unproven premises, they've built upon those, and it's led to disastrous health outcomes. They haven't questioned the foundational premises they've been taught, and they're just helping to spread these false narratives across the world unintentionally. They're most overwhelmingly very good, well-intentioned people. That's what I think. There could be at the tippy top. I still think there likely is at the tippy top. You could even say maybe this is getting a little bit more esoteric spiritual, but some demonic influences in some cases. Maybe if, like something like Wetiko, which Paul Levy talks about, or quite literally like a satanic element to it. But the point is, I think the overwhelming majority of people are doing the best they know how with information they have.
I would absolutely agree. And just to wrap up the previous bit, I came to really believe as a young kid that this kind of duality of artificial light versus natural light was potentially the driving force behind the modern chronic disease epidemic, because all the facts kind of line up. The diet stuff, there's like hundreds of new diets a year. They haven't been able to cure all the diseases. There's all sorts of other poisons and toxins, which there have been poisons and toxins for a long time. Like even in industrial cities, there were a lot of bad things. But when you break down people's fundamental innate systems for detoxification and cellular repair, that's when things could really start to hit the fan. And that's what artificial light essentially does. We didn't even get into the risks of artificial light at night, but essentially you take these bad artificial lights and now you have them at night. The body has this circadian rhythm, this body clock that, most of your listeners are probably familiar with. It's an entire system designed to allow our body to adapt to one primary shift in the environment, which is the presence or absence of sunlight, because sunlight is a stressor. Primordial, basic, single-celled organisms would die instantly upon exposure to sunlight. So complex organisms like plants and animals and fungi have adapted different mechanisms to be able to protect against sunlight. Just like plants, open and close their leaves in certain ways and change water balance and so on from day to night. Our body does the exact same thing. And another Wunchian idea, Dr. Wunsch, I asked him, why did the brain use blue light as the sensor for day and night? I was thinking it's just because blue changes the most throughout the day. It really does, of all the different colors. And he said, yes, kind of. But if you wanted to sense an oncoming threat, the threat being UV light as the sun rises and its power to basically tear apart molecules and cells and whatnot, would you want to wait till the threat has arrived, or would you rather have something that's a bit of a warning before the threat? And blue light always comes before ultraviolet as the sun rises. Another interesting point he mentioned, if you want a sensor to last longer, you should have a sensor that is absorbing a wavelength of light that is not so damaging. So if a sensor has to absorb ultraviolet light, the sensor will be degraded more quickly, the protein, because it has a lot more photonic energy that it has to dissipate. Whereas blue light, especially the longer wavelength blue light, which biology has used in these cells in the eye called intrinsically photosensitive retinal ganglion cells, which absorb blue light, scientists found this in I think it was the late 90s. They discovered this third type of photoreceptor in the eye. There's rods, there's cones, and then they discovered, wait, melanopsin, this thing in the eye, it's in frog skin. Why is it in the human eye? And then they started to realize it's connected to the master clock in the brain. So anyway, this clock increases the body's production of cortisol, other stress hormones like adrenaline and so on, other mineral corticoids. So basically just the onset of morning light changes so many physiological processes that change the flow of blood in the body, mineral balance, and all sorts of different things. And that's our body's protection against the sun, preparation, I should say, for the sun. And so this system controls so many downstream effects in the body. I mean, one big one is sleep and wake. So we're conscious and wakeful, and then we go into repair. So people know the cortisol melatonin rhythm. We have cortisol during the day and melatonin at night. So we're designed to be active during the day, and then we're designed to rest and repair at night under the power of melatonin. And if we have all these artificial lights, which I've just gone through explaining how disruptive they can be even during the day for all these different reasons, if we have them at night, now there's an additional impact, which is that they trick our brain into thinking it's still daytime. So the body stays in this sympathetic cortisol dominant mode rather than going into regeneration and repair. And this is when I mentioned, when you start to remove the body's fundamental ability to tolerate stressors or to defend itself or to heal, that's when I think the disease generation will massively increase. And that's what we've seen with artificial light. And it wasn't as bad with incandescents, but in the last 30, 40 years with fluorescence, and then when compact fluorescents came into average homes, and then quickly they were replaced by LEDs because of how bad they were, and LEDs kind of caught up. Now, I think it's kind of game on. And we're seeing, there was a huge study out of Australia, like nearly 90,000 participants, which basically showed it was studying the effects of light on mental health. And it was very, very interesting, very statistically significant, very conclusive. There's 4 groups of people. There's the group that gets the most natural light during the day and the most darkness at night, which is what we're designed to have. That's how you strengthen the circadian rhythm. There's 2 phases, day and night. And to strengthen the circadian rhythm, it's kind of obvious, right? But you want more light during the day and less light at night, or more darkness. So then the other 2 groups, or I should say 3 groups, 2 groups were either less light during the day or less light during the day, less of the good stuff during the day, and more darkness or more artificial light at night. So these are the kind of in between. And then the worst group was the one that had the least light during the day, natural bright light, and the most artificial light at night. And the conclusions were very clear. The group with the least natural light during the day, bright light, and the most artificial light at night had significant increases of every mental illness, anxiety, depression, schizophrenia, and all of the mental illnesses. So basically, we see everybody going crazy. And I'm not saying light is the only factor, like glyphosate's bad and like vaccines are not ideal and so on and so on and so on. But it's a big factor. And so that's why I'm obsessed about it.
It's a big factor, especially like I'm sitting here thinking this whole time, and I thought the same when I interviewed Tristan. I've interviewed Sarah Kleiner and then Carrie Bennett, who are in the circadian biology space, because the larger health and health freedom movement, this isn't talked at all. Like outside of the circadian and quantum biology spaces, this isn't really discussed. Like this is a very big deal.
Everybody's in the dark.
Dude, this is like the biggest deal to me, man. Especially, again, when I learned Dr. Gerald Pollack's work, it just made so much sense how all of this is so disruptive to the fourth phase water inside our bodies. Like, and then that decreases our capacity to have energy production for our body to do work. It just made so much sense to me. Man. So
that's my shtick.
Dude,
that's it.
That's a great shtick. So I think where I want to go next is discussing the glasses first. Then I would before we get there, I want to talk about how you've changed your perspective on sunlight, because you said that you had originally had this sort of biohacker-esque line of thought with respect to sunlight, like maximizing sunlight as much as possible, but now you've sort of taken a different stance. So let's talk about that a little bit.
Yeah, I would say simplistic thinking generally goes some good, more better. And biohacker thinking goes some good, more better, even more is even better. You know, you just kind of add it, you take it, you extrapolate it out. And this doesn't usually stand up under scrutiny. So I did believe from the beginning, from some of the people I was studying and following and whatnot, that, you know, sunlight's just the best thing ever and we should get as much sunlight as we possibly can. And I believed that for a long time. And I think I definitely overdid it on my sun exposure over the years. And, you know, I'm using my red light therapy diligently to, you know, heal my skin and do all these things. But I was out, even when I felt like I had had enough, I was like, oh, well, more is going to be better, because there was really not much focus in this community on when is enough and when should you kind of stop and say, okay, this is enough. It was kind of like, more sun's always going to be better, and move to the sun and be in the sun all the time. So anyway, when I started to work with Dr. Wunsch, he started to challenge me on this. And I was very resistant in the beginning because I was like this young, like, I know everything, you know? And he's like, okay, kind of like the wise professor, just like, okay, you know, he'll learn eventually. And gradually, it took nearly 2 years, but I started to understand his perspective. Like, okay, sun protection can make sense. Like sunglasses can actually make sense. Sunscreen, chemical sunscreen, there's nuance, right? Like just because it's not either get as much sun as you possibly can or slather yourself with chemical sunscreen. Like that's not the nuance. So Dr. Alexander calls it the thesis and the antithesis, and then the synthesis is in the middle, right? So the synthesis is basically sunlight is the giver of life, and it's really important for our health. And we should sunbathe regularly in the summer in particular. In the winter, it's not necessarily necessary. People getting obsessed about having vitamin D high all throughout the whole winter, it's not even necessarily true. That's a whole other thing, but it's a hormone of summertime. You don't necessarily need it to be high the whole year. Anyway, I mean, if we get enough sun throughout the winter, we also store a decent amount, or I should say throughout the summer, we store it throughout the winter. Anyway, so we should intentionally take advantage of the healing power of sunlight. For example, morning sunlight is also very important, and so on and so on. Then the antithesis is basically, well, the sun causes cancer because some evidence showed that UV light in isolation even can cause cancer cells to form or, you know, accelerate and whatnot. So then the sun's all bad all of a sudden, and we need to wear sunglasses like crazy and lather ourselves with chemical sunscreen and so on. And then basically what's happened is we have way more skin cancer and way more, you know, vision problems and way more cataracts and stuff, which, you know, we're coming to believe more and more that macular degeneration and cataracts have a lot to do now with artificial light as well, lacking near infrared in particular. So, you know, on the screens and whatnot are definitely not helping. So for me, the synthesis was somewhere in the middle saying, well, we should take advantage of the benefits of sunlight and also be moderate and not overdo it. Sunbathe in the summer, sunbathe within reason. Like, for example, for me, what feels like a healthy dose of sunbathing, just for me, and this is only for me and not for anybody else, is, you know, 10 to 15 minutes on each side of my body. And that's usually like a max. And Dr. Wunsch recommends sunbathing if you want to minimize the concerns of skin cancer, skin damage, and all these things, which are typically attributed more to UVA light, then sunbathe in the middle of the day because you have the highest amount of UVB relative to UVA light. You also have the highest amount of UVA in an absolute quantity, but you have the most UVB relatively. So you'll get the most vitamin D in the shortest amount of time with the shortest amount of overall light exposure. So if you really like are a woman who's super concerned about your skin and you want your skin to look like, a baby's butt your whole life, fine. But I would also challenge that like extreme beauty standpoint, because it's like, in nature, yes, you want to look good. Like I get it. But if it's at the expense of your health, because we do need some amount of sun to be healthy. And if somebody wants to, hide from the sun, there's significant evidence. There was a study on Swedish women, which showed that the women who actively sought out the sun and sunbathed, now, I hope it was within moderation to some extent. And there's not that much sun in Sweden anyway. So it kind of was naturally moderated. They're not going to, Costa Rica presumably, or whatever, versus the women who avoided the sun. The ones who avoided the sun had nearly double the risk of death from all diseases, so all-cause mortality. That was a pretty significant finding. So anyway, I think everybody should take some sunlight and benefit from it, but don't overdo it. It's actually quite simple when you think about it. And when it comes to chemical sunscreens, don't use chemical sunscreens because they've been shown to cause all sorts of problems, because the chemicals which absorb the UV light and basically reduce its power to just heat are naturally degraded. The more UV light that they successfully convert into heat, the more that they become degraded and even damaging free radical molecules, which get then absorbed into the bloodstream and are or have been shown to be carcinogenic in some cases. So chemical sunscreens are not really an intelligent idea based on, and there was even a massive recall like 2 summers ago, like massive recall of all these chemical sunscreens because one of the ingredients was proven, I guess, to a point where they couldn't deny it anymore. But what about all the other ingredients? Anyway, so mineral sunscreens stay on your skin. So you put them on and like I wear the zinc when I surf on my nose. You have to like wipe it off. It's like a physical protection. So it's not absorbing. It's based, it uses zinc. And then wearing hats, wearing clothes, and just being moderate. That's my latest stance on sunlight. And I think it's really reasonable. And I think anybody who's getting into this should do that, because otherwise you'll probably regret overdoing it on sunlight.
Have you looked into Fitzpatrick skin types at all?
Yeah, generally. I mean, I'm familiar, like the 1 is the lightest and I believe the 6 is the darkest.
Yeah. I think there's a lot of possible credence to that idea that like you're supposed to get a certain amount of sun exposure based on your skin type, really based on your ancestry and heritage.
Exactly. Yeah.
Which like makes a lot of sense. Like people like you and I weren't living near the equator. So people like you and I, when we are near the equator in the summertime, we need to be a little bit more mindful of how much sunlight we're getting. And again, I don't think anyone listening to this, if they're truly listening to what you're saying, is going to take away, oh, he's saying that the sun is harmful. That's not what you're saying at all. I had a friend.
It just depends on the dose.
It depends on the dose. I had a friend die of water poisoning, dude. Literally, I had a friend in the Army, was in Ranger School and overhydrated himself and died of water poisoning. Now, he was probably getting pretty horrible water, but nonetheless, died of like water poisoning. I forget the exact technical term, but the point is, it's like you can overdo it on a variety of things. And I could totally see where a lot of people are overdoing it on sunlight. And that being said, it's like, I think you can increase your capacity to have sunlight by developing like your sun callus. I think that's what people typically call it. And because we're inside more than human beings and, past generations, I think that we are much more impacted by the sun negatively than past generations were, because we're not developing that sun callus. We're not spending consistent time in the sun relative to past generations.
Yeah, absolutely. It makes perfect sense. My ancestors are largely from Ireland. There's very little sun in Ireland a lot of the year, most of the year. And so our skin is not well adapted for high intensity solar radiation in the tropics, on the equator, and so on. So that's another challenge I have with places like Bali and Costa Rica, as awesome as it is that in the modern world, you can get on a plane and fly to these places and live there. And a lot of young people, influencers in Bali and whatnot, love it because it's like, oh, there's no winter. I've come to think and feel even more and more that there's some cost, especially for people whose ancestors evolved in temperate zones, to skipping winter. And I'm craving winter. Like, I really crave it. And I'm actually like just anticipating going back to Switzerland and just staying there in the snow for months. You know, that's my hope right now. So
I'm the same way, man. My wife and I argue about that all the time. That's so funny. Most healthcare today operates on an outdated mechanistic model, treating the body like a battlefield rather than a self-healing system. You wait months for an appointment only to receive a rush diagnosis that labels you rather than truly understanding your unique health. Even in holistic health, many practitioners rely on endless lab tests and supplement protocols, addressing symptoms instead of the root cause. And the result? Another prescription or supplement regimen that merely suppresses or masks symptoms rather than facilitating true healing, whether the imbalance was physical, emotional, energetic, or a mix of all three. And that's why Dr. Tom Cowan co-founded the New Biology Clinic, to offer something radically different. As one of the most respected natural health doctors in the world, Dr. Cowan has spent decades challenging conventional medicine and advancing a deeper understanding of human biology, water, and natural health. His work isn't just about rejecting the mainstream. It's about offering a more truthful, biologically coherent approach for healing. The New Biology Clinic recognizes that health isn't about fighting disease, it's about restoring balance. You're not a diagnosis, you're an individual with a unique story, and healing should honor that. With virtual consultations available worldwide, the clinic offers a flat-rate monthly membership that gives you direct access to practitioners who take the time to actually listen. Members also get exclusive health live streams, a resource library, and live sessions covering everything from biofield tuning and breathwork to movement and meditation, all designed to support whole body healing. And if you're not ready for a membership, you can book a one-time appointment, sign up for an enrichment-only membership for the healing modalities alone, or schedule a free connection session with one of the care team members to see how the New Biology Clinic can help in your specific situation. This isn't about keeping you dependent on doctors. It's about making you sovereign over your health. Head to newbiologyclinic.com and use code THEWAYFORWARD, and that's spelled The Way, F-O-R-W-A-R-D, for $50 off account activation, or just head to the show notes for more info. If you're a member of The Way Forward, email hello@thewayforward.com for $150 off. Your body already knows how to heal, and New Biology Clinic helps you remember. Okay, now I want to talk about the glasses, though. We haven't even talked about them yet, and that's like your main. That's your main shtick. I won't say it's your main shtick, but it's
I usually, I wait till
you're the founder of Raw Optics, so we got to talk about Raw Optics a little bit.
Let's do it.
So, what went into what was the inspiration for the glasses in the first place?
So, when I started learning about all this information, one of the takeaways, what I call this whole protocol now the light diet. So, putting all the pieces together, morning sunlight, and so on. We can go into more detail later, but the glasses are one key piece of the light diet. And I was wearing some safety goggles that were available on Amazon at the time, which blocked a substantial amount of the harmful light, but they were quite unattractive. The other option to have attractive glasses was the clear lenses, which don't work. So there are some kind of stylish frames, blue light glasses with a nice frame, but the lenses are clear or nearly clear, and these block generally less than 5% of the harmful range of blue light. And even the best ones that are clear that claim to block, 15 times the average is like 2%. So they're only blocking maybe 30% at best of a particular range, which is the more bad blue. So, okay, it's good that even the best is blocking 30% of the bad blue, but most of them are blocking, 5%, let's say 10%. These clear lenses or near clear lenses aren't blocking any of what we'll call the good blue during the day, but then becomes bad blue, circadian, sleep disrupting blue light at night. And so clear lenses are really ineffective for the significant biological effects that I was going for based on the research I learned about. In high school, I was connecting with a lot of people, like my friends in some respects. I had my home friends, but then I had some internet friends from these online communities in the Facebook groups. And one of these really cool guys who I kind of looked up to, when you're in high school and you meet somebody, you're like 16 and they're like 19, you're like, oh, you're like a big kid, I should listen, And this guy, really nice guy named Keaton, was like, dude, you should read these books about startups. He had grown up in Napa Valley near the whole Silicon Valley world, at least closer, than I from coming from Philadelphia. And I read a few books. One was called The Hard Thing About Hard Things, which told me that, any business you start isn't going to be easy, effectively, by a guy named Ben Horowitz, one of the tech startup dudes. Another book called The Lean Startup, which was the most useful, which basically kind of gave me a roadmap for how to build a business. One was The 4-Hour Workweek as well, which is basically saying, like, from Tim Ferriss, you can, in this modern world with the internet, you can make a business, make money online and kind of live anywhere, and even take the arbitrage if you make money in the West and go to a cheaper country, for example. So I was inspired that I could have this online business and kind of travel, which now 8 years later, I've gone pretty hard on that one. And the last one was 0 to 1 by Peter Thiel, which basically says, the thing I took away from it was, if you know something that other people don't know, you have a great opportunity. And I was like, well, I think I know the cure for cancer because I've, learned all this information. So I had all this business knowledge in my brain. And this was while I was studying abroad for a year in high school in Eastern Europe, in Bosnia, in a Serbian part of Bosnia. So that's why I learned Serbian while I was there. And it just all started to click. When I came home for my last year of high school, I had learned all this over the years of high school. As I mentioned earlier, I had gone through the diet world, transitioned to the light world around my sophomore year of high school, second year, went and studied abroad. I saw how much healthier these people were too. I mean, in Bosnia, it's still like a modern country, but they're eating really natural food. Like, they're not in the EU industrial food system. They have local, like, they always were so proud. They'd say domaci, domaci. This is like homegrown, homemade, and their food was coming from like that area, or maybe the South. Like, I remember when it was, mandarina season, like mandarin orange season in like November, and from Herzegovina, southern Bosnia, I was eating like 10, 20 mandarin oranges a day. I was loving them. And surely it was good for my immune system going into the winter. Like,
seasonally appropriate too.
It was amazing. Yeah, I didn't even know until I was in Europe, even later, that that's actually the season for oranges, is like November. Like, that's when they really ripen. So anyway, I saw how healthy. What really shocked me, I have to say, was comparing. Like, I was analyzing very closely the physical health of the females at my school, their physical appearances. So, as many high school boys do. And they just looked so much healthier, and the guys too, like so much healthier, so much more robust than my peers at home. Like, kids were either skinny, fat, or like just not healthy looking. There were very few people who looked like truly healthy. And there it was like, the rule was people looked healthy.
That's what I noticed about Serbia too. Amongst the adult population as well. Like, in Serbia, I've been there twice now, and like, I noticed the exact same thing. People are very healthy there.
Yeah, and they don't dye their hair blue.
Yeah.
Just kidding. Sorry.
That is true.
So
I'm going to save this because it's not appropriate. It would offend a lot of people.
Okay, fine.
I learned some interesting stuff when I was there, though, about like how they approached that whole topic. Let's just put it that way.
Yeah, me too. They were they were like 16-year-old kids. They were very open about their perspectives. But anyway, they're obviously taught with what their parents believed, and not that they have it all right. Like, there was a lot of war and conflict.
For
like,
sure.
The war, when I was there, the war had ended just like 20 years prior, So the mosque was still a pile of rubble, I believe. Or no, it had just been rebuilt, one of the mosques. Because, there was the strife between the Serbs and the Muslims. And then anyway.
Split up of Yugoslavia.
Yes, exactly. So living there, I was so convinced that everything I had learned, both about diet, but also about light, because I was so focused on light at that point. I was like, these people spend so much time outside. They walk everywhere, like they're drinking coffee outside. It's just like an outdoor lifestyle. And I just thought that's got to make a difference, because in the US, it's like you wake up, you drive in your car, you get to school. This is in high school. Like you go to school, you might play sports outside for an hour, maybe two, but that's a small portion of the kids who actually play sports. And these are kids, like, not adults. Adults are even in more. And, kids are supposed to be out playing, but they're not. They're at home stressing about their grades, which don't matter because you're just being trained to be like corporate slave. But anyway, side note.
Small side note.
Just, anyway.
Blue light might add to that too, by the way.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Tax slavery. I mean, that's what it is. So just call a spade a spade. Wage slave. Yeah, there we go. And with wages are implicit other things. So anyway, I came back and I had my senior year, and I was like so thrilled in Bosnia. And I was even going to stay for my last year of high school, but for some reason I felt like I had to come back. And I think it was in the end to have that juxtaposition of like, oh my gosh, this is terrible. Like, people, they were like having fun and like going out, and in the US, it was like, we're going to have fun. We're going to like drink till we can't think, you know, like it was very different. Like they were like socially drinking, connecting, like, and that's why I fell in love with Europe. And that's why I pretty much moved to Europe. I'm not a fan of the whole communist socialist deal in Europe, but like I am a fan of the social energy in Europe. It's a very different culture. It's the cities also, speaking of thought forms, as we spoke earlier, the cities were created in a time when there were no cars. And so like they're pedestrian driven, you know, people walk on these streets and cars don't come down those streets unless they have to go to somebody's place or whatever, a little delivery there, because it's, for them, it's slower to go through those central streets in Paris and London and Rome, everywhere in the major cities in Europe, and even the small towns.
Dude, I lived in a small town in Germany for nearly 6 months playing handball. And that was one of the first things I noticed, how the way that small towns are designed are all pedestrian focused as well. And what I love about European cities, at least the ones that I've been to, is that they mix commercial and residential. Whereas, especially in the Midwest of the United States, you have a big suburban neighborhood where neighbors don't actually care to get to know each other. They're barely outside. They like keep to themselves. And then you have 2, 3, 4 miles of highway. And then you have some strip malls.
Yeah, strip malls, I was going to say. That's like, I just came back from, you know, being gone most of the year, and the characteristic feature of the United States of America, strip malls. Like, that's really what it is. And there they have like cafes everywhere and like shops and stuff. Yeah, it's different. Again, the cities, of course, were formed before cars. There was like horse-drawn carriages. So it was a different incentive. But I don't love that our cities are built around cars. You know, it's like I was sitting at like a nice place in, you know, everyone's like, oh, this is the nicest place in West Palm Beach to eat a coffee, drink a coffee or whatever and eat. I'm like, I can't sit outside without cars going by and construction happening everywhere. Like, I'm not feeling it, you know? So anyway, so I came back. This is all of the inspiration for me starting the company somehow. Not sure quite how, but anyway, so I came back and I was quite miserable. I was even going to drop out of high school and like fly out west to hang out with this friend of mine in Silicon Valley and like start a startup. But somehow I persevered through high school, for better or for worse. Oh yeah, and by the way, like it wasn't that difficult because my friends always laugh at this, but I had my mom's friend who was a neurologist at Penn who actually introduced me to Dr. Douglas Wallace, the mitochondrial researcher, and I went and met him several times. But my mom's friend was this neurologist who, you know, worked down the hall from Dr. Wallace, and he wrote a letter truthfully saying that, you know, I get migraines, and he recommends that I have my schedule structured such that I can get morning sunlight every day before class so that I can, prevent my migraines and improve my circadian rhythm. And the school accepted it because it came from a doctor. And I was able to have like all my classes in the afternoon. So I'd show up at like noon every day. And my friends were like, dude, what are you doing? Like, how'd you get this set up? And I was also just taking the minimum credit requirements, but it would have been so annoying to have to show up at like 8 a.m. one day and then wait 4 hours till the rest of my classes. So it helped to bunch everything together. And I just spent all my time reading and learning about this information and thinking about what the business idea was going to be. And I thought about maybe doing coaching, and I thought about doing lighting, which we're doing now, later. And then I came to blue light blocking glasses, but only in a roundabout way through our mutual friend Luke's story. I had a pair custom made for myself, and a friend of mine had also done it because he had kind of gotten on this train of light and health because he saw how it was affecting me and I was looking healthier and fitter and everything. And so I was pushing a lawnmower one summer day because I was saving my money to go do a gap year and travel before potentially starting college, which I wasn't sure I was going to do, but it was like a fallback plan for me. And I heard Luke's story interviewing one of the people I had learned a lot of this information from. And I kind of just had this feeling that, you know, I felt like Luke wasn't quite grasping it. It was so early, you know, like nobody was talking about this stuff, but I had studied it for a couple of years. And so I thought, you know what, maybe I can help clarify or sort of explain it in a way while retaining the true essence, which is really important to me, not, you know, bastardizing or messing up the information, but keeping the essence and the truth, but putting it in a way that people could relate to as I had to for myself and could benefit from. And so, and then Luke on the ad read in that podcast said, hey, if you're on the East Coast or in New York, I'm going to be at this beauty shop, you know, doing a lecture, and come and connect if you're a listener of the podcast. I was like, it's my chance. So I basically took my car, drove up to New York, and my buddy came with me, 2-hour drive from Philly, parked. We ate all you can eat sushi, which was awesome. Never forget. And then Luke I asked him, could I go on your podcast and share this information? But before I even had a chance to do that, he said, hey, like, where'd you guys get those cool glasses? And we're like, oh, they're custom. So he said yes to having me on the podcast, which was really fortunate because it actually became his number one downloaded podcast, even when he had interviewed so many like relatively much more famous than me guests. I was totally unknown. Some really big names in his first 10, 20 episodes. It was his longest episode ever. I was his youngest guest ever and his least known guest ever. And it was an over 3-hour episode.
So dope, man.
And yeah, it became the number one download. So it was kind of like the world wanted the information. But then he asked, where'd you get the glasses? And I reflected on this years later. It was kind of like I was asking the universe, in my view, for a shot to like, I want to share this information. Like the people need it. And the universe was like, all right, bro, but like you got to be able to deliver the goods, like you got to be able to give people the medicine, give them what they need to make it practical. And you have to figure that out. And that's not an easy task. And so I think that's where the business came from. And he, like at a fundamental symbolic level, but the practical way it played out was that I tried to connect Luke with the company that did this tinting, and it was a whole process. And he was like, dude, this is too complicated. And I was like, you know what? I can actually do it for you. So we started as a company with me, like literally tinting lenses in my garage. Like I had a hot plate, a chemistry beaker, water, lens holders, and lens tint, and heated it up and dipped the clear lenses in, and they came out red or orange. And I created a Google form and sent it out to the light quantum health community and offered this custom tinting service. At the beginning, it was Matt's custom blue blockers on my, what was supposed to be a personal blog in the beginning. And then very quickly, from some of the startup books I had read, I realized one of the books said, listen to your customers. Sounds obvious, but one customer said, if I hadn't read that in a book, I might not have listened so carefully. One customer said, hey, I'd love to be able to just pick a frame from you, not have to like buy my own frame and ship it to you. So can you offer that? And I was like, shoot, this has to be a brand now. Like it can't just be like a custom tinting service. So that's where Raw Optics was really born. And Raw is the god of sunlight, and optics is the science that studies the properties and propagation and transmission and so on of light. So Raw Optics is just sunlight, actually, simply put. So that's how it started. And then it just kind of started taking off, and then we had like a lot of celebrity type people like Rick Rubin, a lot of people on the forefront started wearing the glasses really early on, which obviously helped. Like Ben Greenfield as well in the health and wellness world. And so it kind of picked up speed, and now it's been 8 years. It's kind of crazy. And I've just been going around the world, like meeting cool people and sharing the information, and people find it valuable. But the lighting is the real thing we need to fix. And so I see the way the company is going to go is we're going to have the protective and therapeutic eyewear for different purposes, both blue light protection, daytime, nighttime. We have 2 types of lenses. So the yellow lenses for daytime protection to protect from all the ill effects of artificial light that we discussed earlier. So they're reducing eye strain, headaches, and fatigue, reducing that unnatural hormonal stimulation. So kind of letting people take their power back from that, whether it's nefarious or not, but that kind of intentional increase of blue light to jack up cortisol levels. We're giving people the ability to stop that with these daylight lenses that I'm wearing now. With the sunset lenses, it's just blocking a broader spectrum and more to basically tell the brain it's totally dark out. So whereas these lenses block around 50% of the hormonally stimulating wavelengths so that you can kind of chill out but not fall asleep, the sunset lenses block effectively 100% of the hormonally stimulating wavelengths. So they put you to sleep.
I definitely noticed that. Like if I'm ever up at night watching a show with my wife before bed, I noticed that I can barely last through the show if I'm wearing the sunset lenses, which is a good thing. It's
a very good thing.
Appropriate on a biological level.
It is. And then we just invented a new type of lens called Blue Sync in this spring. It was Dr. Wunsch's idea. The question was, now that we have 2 types of lenses, daylight and sunset, for day and night respectively, which block effectively all of the bad blue, the harmful blue light. And then during day, the daylight lenses reduce the hormonally stimulating blue by about 50%. So you reduce that unnatural stress response. You chill out, you can focus better, and you can think better and all that stuff, and you're protecting your eyes. And then you have the sunset lenses that put you to sleep by blocking all of that blue and the majority of green light, and just the intensity of light overall is also reduced. He said, could we create a lens which is protecting from the bad blue, but letting through as much as possible of the good blue to give the body an increased stimulus of focus, sharpness, and circadian stimulation, essentially, a chronobiological stimulus, because chronobiology is basically the study of the body clock, how it works. So chronobiological processes are anything that relates to the body clock. I didn't mention that earlier when I used the big sciencey sounding word. But anyway, so Blue Sync is the first ever lens which is designed to protect from short wavelength, more harmful blue, while transmitting the beneficial good blue wavelengths. And what it does is by reducing the other ranges of the visible light spectrum relative to the good blue light, it shifts the brain's perception such that there's more light, and it has a stimulating effect because the sensors in the eye and the brain are working on a relative basis. Like, for example, the pupil adjusts depending on the total intensity, but these sensors are largely working on a relative basis. And so it's increasing the melanopsin is the sensor in the eye, so we call it melanopic blue light in technical terms. It's increasing the melanopic lux, so the stimulating intensity, because lux is light intensity of the light, by approximately 35%. So like if you wear these out, you could kind of think that you're getting, if you're out for an hour, you're having like an hour and a third, more or less, of stimulus. So you can use them outdoors or you can use them indoors. Indoors has a similar effect, like a more activating and stimulating effect. In fact, since we're well into the podcast, I'm going to put them on and sharpen myself up a little bit here and see how it goes. But it's a very interesting feeling. They're very refreshing. The other cool thing about BlueSync is that BlueSync is the first ever circadian friendly sunglass lens. So in other words, traditional sunglasses like the black lenses you see or brown or grayish, they're basically blocking UVA and UVB, which in excess I do believe now are not desirable. But some, especially UVB in moderation, is very important. But the circadian biology cult doesn't like that, but it's okay. It's okay. You know, I'm very open. Like, I don't mind. I love it. We were attacked very much for this lens because we were like, what? You're a trader. You're selling sunglasses. But anyway, so for those open to reason, traditional sunglasses also, to give you that visual relief, they darken the rest of the visible light spectrum, which means they're also reducing good blue light, which we want during the day, especially when we go outside. So regular sunglasses literally blunt the circadian impact of sunlight on our body system. They reduce its impact and its efficacy, and therefore all of the health benefits that we get from sunlight exposure. So if you go outside with sunglasses, there's a reason the biohackers say that they're bad. This is one of the main reasons. I think the main reason. So we design a sunglass lens which lets through the good blue light while still giving you visual relief, reducing the other visible light wavelengths and protecting from UVA, UVB, and more of the short wavelength blue light, which is damaging than other sunglasses do, because they don't really acknowledge or realize that short wavelength blue is another risk factor similar to UVA when you're exposed to excess sunlight. So this is BlueSync 1, I'll call it. We'll most likely have a darker version of BlueSync which still lets through the good blue. But for people, like, for example, I was wearing this in Greece in July. It wasn't a dark enough sunglass. Like, it's this kind of, there's different categories. Like category 1 is the lightest sunglass. Category 4 would be like what you'd climb Everest in, like the blackest black. Most sunglasses people wear are between a 2 and a 3. So this is like a gentle sunglass. And we'll have probably something like a category 3 for intense, on the water and things like that, where you can still get protection from the UVA, UVB, and HEVL, high energy visible light, short wavelength blue, but get in the stimulating good blue light. So that's BlueSync. So anyway, what I was getting at is that we're going to have, as a business, the way I see it going and the way it is going is we have this kind of branch of eyewear, which is focused on protection and even some, like, let's call it therapeutic effects, although the FDA doesn't like that term. So we'll just say sort of no, they don't like that either. They don't like anything that's health promoting. You can't say that either. You don't even have to keep this all in, but basically, wellness enhancing.
Yeah. Wellness
enhancing eyewear. That's okay. So wellness, forget everything else I said. That was irrelevant. Wellness enhancing eyewear.
This is not medical advice.
Yeah, precisely. This is not medical advice. I said it too. Don't cut this. And then you have, so we have lighting, so specialty wellness lighting, which is what we're starting around January this year. And then we'll have like light therapy, let's call it, like red light therapy, photobiomodulation. So we've been working on a red light panel for 3.5 years, but like to make something that's truly better than everything else. And I don't know when that's going to come to fruition.
What makes it different? I also want to get into what makes your glasses different versus other quote unquote blue light blocking glasses out there. And then also what is the problem with a lot of the supposed circadian biology light bulbs that are out there too. I threw a lot at you.
No, I got you. I'll keep the red light panel part brief because cool. At this point it's such
3.5 years,
fun.
Man.
It's because we're perfectionists. That's two perfectionists working on a product at the same time.
Yeah.
We need somebody to crack the whip.
Is it Dr. Wunsch who's working on it with you?
We're both, yeah, exactly. So it's the main thing that makes it different from standard red light panels, assuming it gets released one day. I mean, we have some samples, which are nice, but it will, is that we have a broader spectrum. So like using LED technology, most red light panels almost all of them focus on just 2 wavelengths. And the ones that claim that they have more wavelengths, we can't measure them. So they don't have enough to even be significant. So we've created the first red light panel that actually has a significant amount of these other beneficial wavelengths based on the evidence. It also has a revolutionary frequency mode because Dr. Wunsch, before he studied light, he actually was studying frequency and how it affects the brain.
When you interviewed him on your podcast.
Yeah. So he studied frequency. And
I also loved how German he was. He was in the middle of a thought and you tried to interject to ask him a question. He was like, let me finish my thought. And he just continued.
So great. No, he's the best.
German.
He really is. He's the best. I really love him. He's like an uncle in a way to me now at this point. It's awesome. So the frequency mode is, they're basically, to keep it simple and not get into all the details, there are certain frequencies which you can apply to the brain and to the body, like through electrocranial stimulation on the earlobes, which is a device he invented many years ago, that can modify the way the brain functions and the cells function in desirable ways. And so we've programmed biological based frequencies into this device. Unlike a lot of other devices where they just kind of make up a frequency that they think, 40 hertz, like that's going to be good for the body. For example, I just made up 40 hertz, but maybe there are some that have some evidence behind why they use a certain frequency.
528.
Yeah, but a lot of them don't necessarily. And so
forced human resonance, 7.83.
Precisely, that's a big one. That's one of them in the device, 1 of 10. So yeah, that's a good one. So anyway, that's what would make it different mainly. And then, of course, trying to keeping down the EMF and all the other stuff and making it just really, really high quality, user friendly, because a lot of them are loud or they're cheap or whatever. Anyway, but that's about the red light panel, which is probably a bit out in the distance because the bulbs are coming soon. So about the glasses.
Yeah. Let me ask that again.
Yeah,
so
go ahead.
So what makes your glasses different from other blue light blocking glasses that are on the market?
Yeah. So when I started Raw Optics, the main issue was that there was a huge gap in the market. As I mentioned, there were either products which blocked the right wavelengths of light to some extent, but they were clunky kind of Terminator style safety goggles, which I didn't feel comfortable wearing, for example, in high school, going to parties, wanting to meet girls and all that stuff. And nobody would really feel comfortable wearing them. The ones which looked a little bit cooler had the clear lenses. They claimed to be blue light glasses, but when I test them with my spectrometer, this expensive light testing device, it showed that they literally weren't blocking any of the wavelengths of light that are of the most concern emitted by modern screen devices and LEDs. That was really the issue with these. So I was forced to choose between effects or efficacy and style, essentially. And that wasn't the choice I wanted to make. So I created Raw Optics to basically combine the two, science and function and style. And so we combine lenses developed with the world's leading expert, Dr. Alexander Wunsch, which block the right wavelengths of light, but don't just block all the light. A lot of lenses say, we're just going to block all the light and make it darker and darker. You start to get to diminishing returns and actually make the lenses even potentially harmful at a certain point because they're so dark, people will trip over their own feet, or the pupil gets wider and then actually more light comes in the end because they made it so dark. They're not really functional. So we focus on maximizing protection while also maximizing functionality, which means wearer comfort, usability, color perception. And also we get into the fine details of like the actual hue, because even slight differences in the subtle hue of the orange or the yellow, whether there's more golden or greenish undertones, has an effect on both the psyche and physiology, according to the research of Dr. Wunsch. And this is the kind of nuance that, as far as I'm aware, no other company is getting into this level of detail. And so that's where we really excel. We've spent so many hours just looking at like different filter booklets and different colors to get exactly the hue we want, because everything else can be the same and the hue can be slightly different. So that's really where we are different from most other companies on the lenses. For the protection, which is what most people are focused on, we subject the lenses to high intensity, short and long-term stress tests with broad spectrum LEDs, which simulate effectively sunlight, including ultraviolet, to see that even after being exposed to nonstop direct light next to the thing at high intensities, which would mimic years and years of sun exposure, there's hardly even the slightest blemish in the pigment. So they're very durable in long-term stress tests and in very short-term stress tests under high intensity blue flashlights and so on. So that's really where we excel. We had to create our own measurement procedures because there was literally no standard, and there was no standard, and we had to create our own standards in order to make the best product. And so we're actually also looking at kind of standardizing those standards so that other companies can compare against them. On the frame side also, even the ones that were supposedly stylish but didn't work, they weren't really that high quality. So Raw Optics, we focused on basically making frames which are truly high quality, attractive, and stylish, which people actually feel good about wearing. As any doctor knows, the most important part of any treatment is patient compliance. And if somebody doesn't feel good about wearing their glasses, they're not going to get the benefits. They're going to say, oh, it doesn't really work. Well, a lot of the time it doesn't work because you don't wear it, you know? So if people feel really excited about wearing it and their friends are going to compliment them, then they're going to wear it and they're going to get the effects. And so that's why Raw Optics are ultimately different from all the other blue light blocking glasses on the market. There are none that have really hit the mark. There are some that have started to do better, but we're still ahead, fortunately. And we're innovating, by the way. Nobody else is thinking to invent something like BlueSync. So I'm really happy to be able to say we're innovating. You got a Dr. Wunsch
in your back pocket,
yeah,
man.
Exactly. He's
other
the best.
Companies don't have that.
It's true. And it'd be good to get him on the podcast, actually, at some point. That'd be really interesting.
That'd be so cool to talk with him.
Yeah.
I also noticed that in your marketing, you've taken the complaints from some of the people like, why are these glasses so expensive, and run with that as part of your marketing strategy. Can you talk about that a little bit?
Yeah, I mean, that's an interesting one. I'd have to call my marketing department. But
why are your glasses more expensive? Because in the wellness space, I totally get why people have become skeptical of products that are more expensive. Like, I get that because there's a lot of people with products out there that make all these bold claims that don't turn out to be true. They feel like they've been had. I get it. And at the same time, if there's something that is truly superior to the other products out there, then it makes sense why it might be priced a little bit higher than the other blue light blocking glasses on the market.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, when we talk about why they're more expensive, I think the first thing to look at is essentially, what are you paying for? So people are paying for an effect. Ultimately, they want to have a change in their life. And we've invested literally thousands of hours in creating the best possible product. And that there's a significant cost associated with that. And also being able to, for years and years and years, to be able to educate people in a way that's true and to stay true to the science without having to kind of, I've never taken any investment. I own 100% of my company, so like without having to bow down to some investor or some corporate interest that might want to try to tell me how to do things, So you could say that's a small part of it, but ultimately, if we compare it to, all the things people spend money on to try to get health effects, like people spend thousands and thousands of dollars on red light panels and all sorts of other things. And most of those things, supplements, people spend hundreds or even thousands of dollars a month on supplements. And most of these things, you don't even feel the effects. You don't. It's a fact. I mean, I've even had the founders of one of the largest red light panel companies in the world tell me that they know that if they don't use our product, it's like the one thing that they notice the fastest. The former CEO of Aura, who I spent time with, they knew, the one thing that has the biggest immediate impact on your sleep score is wearing sunset lenses in the evening. So, and we ended up having a partnership with Aura as a result of that cool relationship. And, it's just been amazing to see. So people who wear Garmin, Whoop, Apple Watch, Aura Ring, all see consistent improvements in their sleep score. People spend thousands and thousands, tens of thousands of dollars on all sorts of doctors and all sorts of things to try to get better sleep. And literally, most of it doesn't work. And you put on a simple pair of lenses and you sleep better, usually the first night. And the reviews are unbelievable. I almost don't believe them sometimes. We've had a woman who was 25 years addicted to sleeping pills who weaned herself off with our sunset lenses. There was a child, I don't know if it was a boy or a girl, but the parents shared this story that their child had cancer as a kid. And they were terrified when COVID came around because supposedly their child would be far more susceptible to this infection, And so they saw some early data that that melatonin could be protective potentially and increase immunity or something like this, which makes sense based on, what we're discussing with sleep and everything. It could make sense. And so they started dosing their child with melatonin and their child became hooked and couldn't sleep without increasing doses. And the only thing that they could wean them off was the Raw Optics sunset lenses. So these are the kinds of stories. I have a friend who's a corporate recruiter who, he's going to work 16 hours a day plus on his laptop, whether or not he gets a headache. So really the difference for him is that it's just not miserable to grind. It takes away the misery. And he's told me that over and over and over again. So it's actually really, really, they're really cheap compared to, the effects that they're offering people, really inexpensive.
And you're investing in your health.
Yeah. So I can't compare against products that are made at the cheapest way possible that aren't focusing on actually all the science I've described. Somebody might try to copy ours and try to get as close as possible and they might look similar, but we can't guarantee that they're working. We're not going to test them for you. So, if you want something that actually works, and the other thing is we offer a 30-day satisfaction guarantee. So it's if you don't like them, I will pay for you to try them for a month. I can't sell that after you've tried it for a month, but I really know they work. So like try them and find out, FAFO, bro. You'll find out. Like,
I mean, it says something that you got into this space because you were noticing the health effects of the artificial light. And then you started wearing glasses that just happened to look really clunky and bulky, that you were helping your health. And you're like, oh, I'm going to make ones that are way better than this.
I went to parties in them. Like, it was like before being super edgy was like super cool, like maybe that'd be cool
so
now.
People were like, dude, what are you doing?
Yeah, I was just like total dork. It was so funny. I wore grounding shoes to my school in Bosnia. This story came back to my head recently. Like, there were like these leather moccasins and I wore them to school. And my American friend, who was like one of the other kids on the exchange program, he was like, dude, like literally everybody's laughing at you in the school for wearing these, like, why don't you get some real kicks, bro? I was like, dude, I'm trying to be grounded, People just didn't get it. And now it's cool.
That's awesome, man. So one question regarding blue light blockers, because I've had this brought up to me on other podcasts, and I'd love to hear your take. And I appreciate that you acknowledge that like these aren't the ultimate solution. The ultimate solution is fixing the problem at the root and getting different lighting. And you guys are actively pursuing that, which is epic. I'm so stoked for that. Do you think that they can sometimes be a crutch? Possibly.
I'm so glad you asked this question. So regarding the ultimate solution, you do bring up a good point about these glasses and lighting as the kind of core solution. For the next 30 to 50 years, I think that could be how long it takes to get all the lighting in the world to be, healthy. It might never happen, although I really hope it does. That's kind of my mission. And I think it'll keep me busy for a long time. So people ask me like, do you want to sell your company? I'm like, no, I got a lot of work to do. Like I don't know what else I'd do with myself for the next 30 years. So anyway, the glasses do have a huge function in that time. And I, at the same time, I think of them as a Band-Aid, but ultimately it's like a Band-Aid for a wound that's going to take 30 years to heal.
It's also not like a suppression of symptoms type thing either. You know what I mean? Like I could see where maybe somehow someone could make that argument, but the reality is if you're living in modernity, you have an excessive amount of blue light bombarding you on a daily basis.
Yeah. I mean, we talked about the mechanisms. Like we have a circadian rhythm and a body clock, and it's controlled by blue light from the sun. And when we have artificial blue light at night, it literally disrupts this rhythm. So you can use candles in your house at night. I tell everybody, turn off the lights, use candles. You know what I do? I have a headlamp, and I just turn it on red and I walk around in the dark with a headlight. That's the only light I ever use everywhere in the world. So if I'm in a hotel room, I don't use my glasses because I don't need to, because it's dark. But most people aren't going to do that. So they should have the glasses, or they should have healthier lighting. So yeah, for the foreseeable future, it's a really necessary tool in the modern world. And there's been plenty of challenges regarding the daytime lenses of like, well, blue light during the day is good, but it's like, okay, wait, I know we just went through this earlier, but blue light from the sun is balanced by tremendous amounts of near infrared light. It shifts throughout the day. Blue light in indoor artificial environments is generally stagnant with high amounts of blue light, and none of the near infrared, which counterbalances, like I talked about, the effects on cells in vivo in glass, or I should say in vitro, not in vivo. So it has significant effects on our eyes, on our skin. I would consider suggesting, that people wear hats like under these fluorescent lights. Anyway, so it's a necessary tool. Now, as far as a crutch, years ago, I would have said absolutely no way. But in 2021, I started going to some retreats of Dr. Joe Dispenza because I was kind of personally losing my mind, for lack of a better term. I was really stressed. I had been running the business for about 4 years, so halfway to where things are now. And throughout that time, I just felt very lonely in many cases. I was traveling all over the world, but mostly by myself. I didn't have any track laid out for me. Like while pretty much everybody I knew was in college, like partying and drinking and, having fun and being with women and all that stuff, I was kind of like, I'm doing my own thing. Now, it was cool that I made friends much older than myself, like Rick Rubin, and all these other people who started using our glasses and inviting me to come hang out and meet. And I did podcasts and stuff. That was really cool. But there's still that like young person who really desires that social camaraderie. And I didn't really have that experience. I had a great high school experience, but in retrospect, I think it was for the best. I think it was like a sort of opportunity for purification, for lack of a better term, and abstinence, absolutely, from a lot of the debauchery that goes on in college environments and whatnot. I just didn't have a reason to go to college because the business started making money during the gap year. And why was I going to go to college, and have a professor tell me what to do? As soon as it was starting to make money, I met a Qigong master at a friend I was visiting in Norway. It was his sort of teacher. And he was French Canadian. He had this thick Quebecer accent. And he was like, why would you go to college? I told him the whole story. He was like, why would you do that? Why would you go to college? Because I was planning to go in spring for the spring semester. So it was a half a gap year that I had planned on. He was like, I know so many people who just want this information. You found all this information. It's what they're looking for. They're all the spiritual people who maybe didn't know the science. He's like, you could just travel and talk to them. And it just opened my mind. Yeah, I guess I could. And so I was actually traveling around Europe on that first gap year, staying with people from the quantum biology, quantum health community. It was really cool. But anyway, time went on and I was so stressed, so overwhelmed. I didn't have a really healthy routine per se. I was doing almost all the things according to the light diet. I was getting morning sunlight. I was grounding. I was eating the ancestral diet. I was drinking unfluoridated water, all the stuff that you're supposed to do. And I was feeling quite miserable. I was also doing some things wrong. I was working really late into the evening sometimes. And then from the first thing when I woke up in the morning, I wasn't really taking good care of myself. It was just I have this huge opportunity in front of me and the fear of it not working out. And so it was just well, what else am I going to do? I'm just going to work all the time. And so, yeah, I would go for walks and stuff. I also wasn't really training and taking care of my physical health in that respect, which has serious consequences. So anyway, I came to feel that the solution for my challenges was not going to be a biohack solution per se. It wasn't going to be another ice bath. It wasn't going to be more morning sunlight. I really thought, I went from diet, thinking that diet was going to be the be all end all for me, to realizing, okay, I hit a plateau and the more strict I got, the more miserable I became, to light is going to be the solution, light and mitochondria and grounding and the light diet. And I ended up feeling significantly better for a while. And, I got a bit of a tan and I just had so much more energy and slept better and everything and felt healthier and looked healthier and everything. But I hit a certain point at this time where it was this isn't all of it. And I also remember thinking to myself at one point, I remember exactly where I was. I had been in Croatia in the summer. I was kind of losing my mind. I was on this beautiful island. I was actually torn. Which of these two beautiful islands do I want to live on and stay on? I was I don't even know. I was just so kind of lost in many ways. And I remember thinking, if I know everything, because I kind of thought I knew everything following these other people who talk like they know everything, then I should be happy. Because if my model were complete, I would be happy. Because if it's all about dopamine levels and serotonin and I've optimized all that with sunlight, then I should be happy and I should feel good. Well, I realized my model must be incomplete. There must be something that I don't know. And that's when I started to realize, okay, maybe it's a psychological change. And I also felt, when we're in survival, we feel like we don't have time for anything. So I didn't even feel like I had time to waste reading books and doing all this stuff because I was I have a business to run. This is about survival. I can't allocate a lot of time for anything besides this. And so I felt if I'm going to commit to some, spiritual practice or some psychological coaching program that's going to help me change my mindset or something, it has to work. I don't feel like I can afford to have to do multiple shots at this. And so I had come across the work of Dr. Joe Dispenza and I was super, super inspired. It just really felt profound and powerful to me. It made a lot of sense. And so I decided to give it a shot. And I felt like I could trust him as a person compared to some of the, spiritual teachers I had heard stories of throughout the years who friends got involved in their cliques or cults or whatever you want to call it. And then the dirt came out that, they weren't who they said they were and whatnot. And that happens in so many areas, including in health and wellness. But I just had a really good feeling. And I did this online course because it felt more manageable than reading, a couple of books. And it changed my mindset so much. I remember calling my best friend from high school, who actually works with me now. And I remember exactly where I was. I was passing under an underpass in LA after doing a massive hike with these crazy Spartan racer dudes who I had met by chance. And that was a whole separate story. But I was feeling really good. I hiked Mount Baldy in LA, which is a big mountain, in Earth Runner sandals. My toes were bleeding and everything. And I almost died of heat stroke on the way down, but I was feeling good. I was yeah. And I called my buddy. I was dude, I just went through this online course and I realized all this time that I was miserable. And this friend was here for me throughout a lot of the challenges. We had gone on some trips together and, he was just a happy teenager, like enjoying life and having a good time. And I was kind of like losing it, but he was like, whatever, like he was trying to help me, and, but in the end, like people live their own life, and, it's good for people to be supportive, but like at the end, not maybe for people to support too much when it's not a healthy thing. And so I had to figure things out for myself. And I was telling him, like, dude, I realized that all this time that I was so miserable, like I was choosing to be miserable. Like I chose my own misery. It was me. I had to look at myself. It wasn't going to be all this other stuff. And I felt so empowered by this simple shift of perspective. Like I could choose to be happy, or I could choose to change my mindset and my ways. And then I saw this advertisement like in an email for a week-long retreat. And I went to this week-long retreat. And in the previous years, I had studied some degree of spiritual teachings. Like, for example, I had learned about all this quantum biology stuff, and some of the books made me spiritual because one book called The Body Electric talks about, for those who don't know, Robert Becker was an orthopedic surgeon, and he, in the 1950s, 60s, he was studying how salamanders were able to regenerate entire limbs while humans couldn't. And he discovered that there's this electrical current that occurs in the case of an injury and a wound in a salamander, because he would amputate on them and measure everything he could possibly think of, all the chemicals. And he started measuring electricity and found these fields, and basically discovered that there is electricity which is powering the regeneration of these limbs, and documented this entire electrical field which exists around organisms, including humans. And he provided, to my understanding, the only decent explanation of how cells know how to differentiate into what they are. In other words, every single cell, the precursor cells like blastocysts, or people know about stem cells today, have exactly the same 23 chromosomes. So how do cells know what to become? How does one cell know to become a skin cell, another a liver cell, a kidney cell, a nerve cell, and so on and so on? Well, biology doesn't have an answer for that that's any good. But the other question is, how do they know where to go? But it very well could be the case, the more I think about it, that where they go is it is what they become. It directs what they become because of the information in the field. But so anyway, he documented the existence of this energy field. And at the end of his book, I remember the outro, the afterword, he basically said, something to the effect of, I wonder if it's possible that what we've discovered here could potentially provide an explanation for things that have been well documented throughout history, but never scientifically explained, such as miracles, miraculous spontaneous healings, spontaneous remissions, telepathy, and so on and so forth. Like the concurrent learning of traits of animals in different places at the same time that they've measured, So this effectively made me open to all of these sort of miraculous things, because there was science now that at least opened the potential for it foundationally. And then there's a book called Light Shaping Life, Biophotons in Biology and Medicine, which talks about similar concepts, but specifically in regards to how our cells literally generate light. Our cells generate photons, and they communicate with photons. The stimulus for cells to divide is small pulses of ultraviolet light. And even one of the things that stuck out to me is when an organism died, if I recall correctly, the cells basically leak all of this light for a long time in between death and rigor mortis, when the corpse is, cold, hard, and dead, like fully dead. And it seemed awfully like the concept of the soul leaving the body that you hear in pretty much every religion. So I was like, this is interesting. So this was already in my brain, but I hadn't necessarily taken it and made it practical. Then I had read like Ram Dass and these books about how basically, all the spiritual teachers are saying the same thing now. And I've had a lot of conversations with people, including people on my staff recently, about this, how if you look at the orthodoxy of religions, there's conflict. If you look at the orthodoxy of the institutions of religion, but like I personally consider myself a Christian and a Muslim and a Buddhist and a Hindu and a Jew. And that's because I don't see the conflict that everybody else chooses. They want to see the difference. And so, for example, like I was talking with a very Christian member of my team recently, who's like a theologist practically, like a very intelligent and amazing guy. And we got to the topic of Islam, and I was asking ChatGPT for examples of like where religions conflict. And it said something in the Quran like, he who submits to Islam is saved, and he who does not will burn in hellfire, something like that, but I asked him, I was like, hey man, but do you know what Islam actually means? And like separate from the institution? It literally just means full surrender of oneself to God. So I was like, well, by that definition, I guess I'm a Muslim, you know? So, and I only know that because I've traveled so much and I've gone to mosques and they have these people proselytizing and they're like, hey, do you want to know about Islam? I'm like, sure, tell me, why not? You know, maybe I'll learn something. And anyway, for those very orthodox, they don't like this. I could talk on hours about this, about the interpretations of the Christian church, the institution of certain lines like, well, I'm not going to say it, but certain lines in the Bible where it makes it sound like this is the only way. And there are other interpretations of that, which are, I would say, equally fair interpretations that don't exactly mean the same thing or lead to the same conclusions.
Jesus was referring to the I am, the great I am.
Precisely. That's what I was going to say. But you can say it for me. Thank you. So precisely. He wasn't so egocentric. You know what I mean? At least I think. Maybe a certain large group of people thinks otherwise. But anyway. So this was all kind of a build up to this. So finally I go to this retreat and this neuroscientist guy effectively, or, you know, chiropractor doctor who's gone and studied all of this information in a really amazing way and tied it together and shared it with the world, is basically explaining how, you know, these energy centers in our spine have significant effects in our physiology. And there's a decent amount of evidence to support this. And there, of course, you know, this is my interpretation, not speaking for Dr. Joe Dispenza at all, but they appear to be identical to, or nearly identical to, the Hindu concept or the Ayurvedic concept of the chakras, you know. And I went into this meditative state. I started meditating and trying to, you know, I listened to all the information and I tried to let go of my known self, all the stories that I told myself, all the habits, all the patterns, all the beliefs, all the thoughts, and to surrender that and let go of it and to surrender into nothing, you know, and to, you know, take my attention off of everything I know, and then to slow down the brainwaves, because that's part of meditation. You slow down your brainwaves from the high beta or mid-level beta thinking and active down to alpha. It's more creative state, down to theta. It's like a trance. And then delta is sleep. So meditation, you're kind of trying to linger in theta and delta, really low level brainwaves. And then he even showed all this evidence that people who get into this state and they sort of somehow open up to energy, their brainwaves jump up into high gamma, which is like a super coherent, almost like super consciousness, like bliss ecstasy, which I mirrored based on my own reading, like books like The Autobiography of a Yogi, to the samadhi states, which they describe in Hinduism, you know, or in these yogic teachings. It's not just about Hindu religion. It's just yogic teachings, which are sort of secular in a sense, a-religious. And I was like, this makes a lot of sense. Like, you know, maybe these people are just surrendering. They just kind of like connect to something. And so first of all, things started to click for me when I was doing a walking meditation, and I just released something. Like I was doing these walking meditations, feeling, why can't I feel love? And why can't I, and then I just like looked around me and saw all these beautiful people. And I just had some inspiration of like, why not just be grateful and just be happy? And I remember just opening up and feeling so happy and so much love that I like wanted to call each of my family members to tell them how much I love them. I was like, geez, I must have been feeling a lot of love in that moment, you know, like, you know, but anyway, I remember thinking afterwards, after that event and having time to digest it, like, what if all the gut issues I was having from the beginning, now going all the way back to the beginning, had maybe more to do with some sort of stress or some sort of trauma, like not feeling safe, you know, because my parents, they did their best. They're amazing people, but there was strife and conflict, divorce, you know, at a really young age. And I was like, I'm the oldest male. So I tend to believe that it was like, in a way, my burden to take, even if it wasn't really mine, you know, so But I look back on my life and like I literally lived in a state of stress and survival and worry my entire life. And it makes sense that like biologically, you know, if this information is true, if my, you know, gut chakra or whatever, second chakra is constantly blocked because of stress and survival and fear, how could I digest a meal? You know, it would make sense that I would have digestive issues my entire life. And so that was a pretty striking realization. Now, this is all to answer your question if I think blue blockers are a crutch. I believe that enlightened masters, like great enlightened spiritual masters, probably can definitely modulate their biology consciously such that blue light has no effect on them. I just would say that I think 99.99999% of people haven't reached that level of spiritual mastery yet, but they could. I don't think I have necessarily, but I'm working on it, you know?
Orienting towards that in the pursuit of that, but not fully there yet. So understanding that we don't have the full capacity to do it yet.
There's a recent poll that I put out on all my social media channels.
and 95% of people responded that they're struggling to find their health and freedom community in person. And don't get me wrong, these platforms, these devices that you're listening to or watching this podcast on right now are great for helping to disseminate information, helping us, find like-minded people to validate us, but they are not a replacement for real in-person community. At the core of our new community platform is a powerful, easy-to-use map helping you to instantly connect with like-hearted, like-minded community, including men and women, farms, schools, practitioners of all types, and other businesses near you. The platform also includes groups, social functions, messaging, and Platinum members also get access to our content library with footage from all of our in-person and virtual events like Confluence and the end of COVID, as well as breathwork sessions, Qigong sessions, member Q&As, and also member community calls. So if you'd like to support this podcast and support our mission of helping people to connect hyper-locally in person, and also obviously support yourself in the process, go to the show notes or just go to thewayforward.com/join. And again, the way forward is spelled thewayforward.com/join to become a member today. Help us build the way forward for mankind.
I think everybody does have the capacity to do it yet. It's just that we're not necessarily expressing it. But I should add to this. I'm so glad this is like the best question anybody ever asked me, because when I left one of these retreats, I started going back because I was like, I want to remember this information. And Dr. Joe would say it's so much easier to forget this information than it is to remember it. And I was like, well, I've worked all these years and I have some money. I don't know what the heck to do with myself. So I'm just going to keep going back to these retreats once a quarter because why not? I'm actually going to 1 in 2 weeks. I'm excited, but I've slowed down. I went to like 14 of them in like a 3-year period, but I was like, I don't want to forget. I want to remember this. And so after it, I was like, gosh, how do I reconcile the fact that I now fully believe in my heart of hearts that we don't need anything outside of us to be whole, and that I have a product company and I sell products. And I was like, damn it, this is tough. This is a tough one. So what I just answered is part of that conclusion I came to. And what I also came to believe, and I truly believe this, is that all products and everything in the physical and material world has some sort of deeper energetic meaning or symbolism or representation behind it. And I realized that I had been marketing my products similar to those who I had learned from in former times out of fear, and blue light's going to kill you, and blue lights. And I realized I was selling like a solution to fear for people. And right after the event, I basically went home and started thinking and thought about all this. And I didn't have a home then. I still don't, but it was like the place I was staying at the moment in Costa Rica. And thinking about this, and I realized, what do I want to be sharing with people? And I went and literally changed the header of the main line on our webpage to "A New Life is Calling." Because it's like, we're inviting people into a new life. Like I want people, that's what we're offering people. I want people to connect our product with a new life. Like ultimately, this is and I still haven't figured this one out, but there's science showing that these lenses work. Limited, albeit like actual studies are limited and potentially underpowered because, again, who's going to pay for it? Well, eventually we will, right? The pharmaceutical companies aren't, but the mechanistic evidence is extremely rock solid, like beyond rock solid. The most famous public scientist in the world, Andrew Huberman, created a brand selling identical to our sunset lenses. And this is like not a guy, some people can say what they want, but he's not, to me, any sort of huckster. So I think he's a really reputable, great person. I've had a few interactions with him and I fully believe that. So that to me speaks to the level of science behind these products now. So that's there. But anybody who knows anything about medicine knows that the placebo effect is often 30 to 50%, even maybe more of any treatment. And I was like, well, what if we can add? I think that's what marketing is. I think you're basically assigning a placebo so that people get something and they're like, I'm going to add this meaning to this. It's going to offer me this. And let's say the profane person, the non-spiritual, they say, no, that's impossible. And then they're miserable. And that's fine. Their life is miserable.
That's a nocebo effect, essentially.
But if you say, I'm going to do this thing, whatever it is, it doesn't have to be my glasses. I'm going to start lifting weights and I'm going to be healthier. I mean, there are studies like showing that people who mentally do bicep curls get stronger, like they build muscle mass. People who mentally rehearse playing the piano actually play better. It's very interesting, no? So why not just add? And I do think of that now, tying together the research on biophotons and the body electric. Somehow we consciously, and Joe Dispenza kind of gave me almost like permission to tie together all the things which I had learned before into this greater level of understanding. Somehow, by using our conscious awareness, we're directing what I call our inner light. And that became the missing step of the light diet, by the way, is cultivate your inner light. So we can choose to direct it in a skeptical, negative, pessimistic way. I mean, there's so many skeptics, people who are just skeptical about everything. And they're usually miserable too, you know? And then people who are just optimistic about everything, and they're usually really happy. And so I think that's something worth looking at. So in a way, I do believe that yes, not just blue blockers, but every single thing outside of us, this was on your list of questions, including food, is a crutch. So I think blue blockers are as much a crutch as food, because I do believe it's possible to live fully breatharian, fully on light, and people have done it. Many people have done
Johnny, have you looked into him?
Yes.
Yeah, the guy from India who was taken into a hospital for at least 15 days because he had approached the Indian government claiming that he had not eaten or drank anything in 60 years. So they studied him with every ologist you could name, urologist, every ologist, right, for 15 days. And they found in that time he did not eat or drink once. But what was really peculiar is when the urologist would look at him, do an ultrasound of his kidneys, they would fill up with fluid and the fluid would dissipate. Fill up with fluid and it would dissipate. So he was somehow able to maintain the coherence of the ordered water inside of himself, that he didn't need to introduce any new either physical food or water at all, and was able to thrive purely off of his own inner light. And you could say the light of the environment.
Yeah. And most people think, I believe it is inner light. Most people would say that that's crazy and it's impossible. And they're called the profane. They're the people who will believe nothing, you know, and that's fine. But for me, and it all ties back to, for me, I just saw an X the other day or on Instagram, a really cool page. It was like The Culturist, I think it's called. Really interesting. I think you followed them. I think I saw a really interesting page just talking about cool things about culture. And it was talking about J.R.R. Tolkien, the guy who wrote Lord of the Rings, how he detested the idea of the Disneyification of these stories of dragons, things, because they're meant to warn children of the evils in the world and that it can be overcome. But instead, Disney came along and made I don't know if Walt Disney himself did this, but Disney as a company, you know, the big Disney as a company, they went and basically softened over all the little bumps in these stories that could make people uncomfortable. And now it's like the ultimate PC-ification of all of it. But I've always had this feeling, in this post I just saw, I mentioned it because it just kind of justified what I felt like I already knew. I really feel like these stories, which I always loved as a kid, like Star Wars and Harry Potter, like the good versus the evil, I feel like that's literally the journey we're on in life. They're symbolic of the spiritual war, let's call it, or spiritual conflict at least, that exists in the world. And that people say it's like, you can't be a bystander on a moving train or something like that. Like either you're fighting for the good or you're kind of against it, essentially. And I don't even know necessarily what the good is exactly.
Better to be hot or cold than to be lukewarm, for if you are lukewarm, I'll spit you out of my mouth. That's another verse from our man, Jesus.
Okay, there we go.
For real though.
That's good. Yeah, that's really good. So I've come to really believe that is kind of the essence of everything. And I really have come to believe also that personally what we're working on, the glasses are part of a fight for goodness, righteousness, for health, for vitality, for life, for all the things that are good in the world. And they're just one small part of the fight, although they're a very effective piece for each individual, because there are very few things you can do in your life. I would wager almost none as far as a product that you can literally put on your face or just take into your body in one way or another, or put on your body and have such a significant effect right away. No supplement is going to do it. That is going to do this as quickly, except maybe magnesium for sleep. But even then, it's like, I haven't felt effects from magnesium for sleep, but when I don't wear my sunset lenses in the artificial lights at night, they are annoying. They kind of hurt the eyes when you realize how relaxed your eyes are supposed to be in the evening. So that's really what I believe we're doing. So I hope I answered your question about the crutch. All right.
Went above and beyond. That was amazing, man.
Yeah. Thanks for asking. Good.
Yeah. Man.
I had to give you all the context.
No, I love that, dude, because it brings up a lot of thoughts that I've had regarding belief, especially beginning of this episode when you're talking how you used to think that 80% of diet, or I think you're referring back to a blog, 80% of diet is, or 80% of health is diet. And then the rest is the other 20%. And my mind immediately was like, nah, man, I'm pretty sure like near 100% of it is belief. I don't know how much of it is belief, but a very, very, very large portion of it is belief. And there's like conscious belief, there's subconscious belief, there's unconscious belief. So I think with some of these spiritual masters, they've been able to attune themselves so well through practicing over time, through attuning their focus, that they've unlocked all of those layers of belief. And it's no longer a belief anymore for them. It's an inner knowing that they are so attuned to that they can instantly heal, because they know, like, I believe that my body has the capacity to heal itself instantly. But do I really know it? You know what I mean? And I don't mean knowledge from like an epistemological vantage point. I mean like an inner knowing. I'm like, no, there's still parts of me that is really skeptical about that. So I'd say my capacity to heal is probably better than most people. But there's still an element of me that questions that. I don't think with these spiritual masters, they have any doubt at all. They truly know at a deep level that my body can heal. They know at a deep level that I don't care what poison you give me. This doesn't kill who I truly am anyway, first off. And second off, I know that this is the most powerful thing there is in the entire universe sitting inside my body. And there's nothing that you can do to overcome it.
There's so much beautiful content there. But you gave me some ammunition for my peace rifle when you said everything's about belief. I thought, if you believe in science, then you must believe in my glasses, because the mechanism there. So they work, if we want to go this far. If somebody believes in science, which pretty much almost everybody in the modern world will say, well, yeah, I believe in science, because if you don't, you're crazy, people will say. I'm very skeptical of science, let me say. In its ability, I should add, to answer the most foundational questions of life. To understand anything within the context of this world, probably, but the real deep questions.
If done correctly.
Yeah, if done correctly, which is often not the case, corporate interest and whatnot. But if somebody accepts and believes in science as a concept, then there is so much strong mechanistic evidence and some sort of studies, let's say with human studies, to support blue light blocking glasses. There are actually some documentaries that have come out basically claiming to debunk blue light blocking glasses, like many, many times. And what's really cool is, I've studied some science, but one of my staff is a student at Davidson University, and he took this and ran with it. I mean, it was so impressive. He's pre-med, so he really...
Jonathan Jarecki?
Yes.
I like that guy.
Really nice guy. Mega genius. Absolutely stud. And he took apart this one documentary and put together the most unbelievable rebuttal, which we decided, we don't need to publish this because we don't want to give any attention to these people. Why? But he showed in the most beautiful language, scientific language, how these documentaries are basically cherry picking studies. So for example, when one study shows that people subjectively report, and it's a small sample size, but subjectively report that with the blue light blocking glasses, they don't feel like they sleep significantly better, then they say, that's evidence that blue light blocking glasses don't work. Subjective sleep data. Then another study, people subjectively report that they do sleep better, but they say, the study size isn't big enough to be relevant. So it shows what's called confirmation bias. And in the first study, by the way, they did measure significant increases in melatonin. And melatonin, even if you disregard the subjective sleep measurements, melatonin has all sorts of other protective effects against cancers and all sorts of other diseases. So anyway, that's just one small example of what's happening when people, it was easy for me to tune this thing out because it's just like negative, and negativity and more negativity and more. I'm like, and I think that's why it really doesn't go very far. Because when you explain the science simply about circadian rhythms and light, people are like, that makes sense. Because, a good friend of mine who's taught me probably more than almost anybody else in the world, he's an Indian or a Russian guy who basically moved to India and lived there for many years and studied Ayurvedic medicine and then became a yogi. I met him surfing. He's not a publicly famous person at all, doesn't even have social media, but works with people at extremely high levels as a personal family doctor. And I met him just surfing in the water. And he was the first person who actually introduced me to Dr. Joe Dispenza, told me about Joe Dispenza and told me about Yogananda. And it took me, the beauty of the story is The Alchemist. I learned how to surf in Encinitas at the foot of Swami's, at the temple, the SRF, Yogananda's organization, the Self-Realization Fellowship, at Pipes, which is a surf spot just a half a mile down the beach, San Elijo State Beach. I learned how to surf there, and I always wondered what that beautiful place was up on the cliff. I went literally all the way around the world to Bali, surfing, met this yogi who told me about Yogananda and Joe Dispenza. Didn't know anything about the temple in SRF. Had a couple years go by of struggling and suffering, and then realized wait a minute, that temple was the person who I read the book, the autobiography, and realized that's the temple that he started, this guy who inspired me so much. And I was already there all along. Like literally I did. And I was even wondering about it. I just never went and asked the question. And instead I had to go all the way around the world to get the information.
So cool,
but anyway,
though.
he's told me so many wise principles from, the Vedas and the scriptures and so on and so forth. And one of them, relevant to the previous point about people understanding the principles here, he asked me, do you know why when you read something in a book, it feels so true, or it can feel so true? I was like, why? He said, because your soul already knows everything and it's just reminding you what you already know. And so that's what books do for us, I'm also skeptical of too much reading now. Like I used to shovel information down my brain constantly, and just read, podcast. And I felt like if I wasn't, in the know enough to be able to know every single reference that they bring up on a Joe Rogan podcast in the moment. Like, oh, did you hear this person said that about da-da-da-da, and this study showed this and da-da-da. Nothing against it, but like, I'm just like, oh my gosh, why do you need all that information in your brain? And these people aren't even happier for it.
Amen.
I've just talked to one of the biggest podcasters in the world the other day, really amazing guy. And he basically told me that he's interviewed, 1,000+ people and doesn't necessarily feel like he's any closer to the answers or something. Actually, and this is a classic thing in science, but that he realizes that now he has more questions and knows less, So not saying that learning knowledge isn't a good thing, but I was miserable for so many years. I just have to share this. I feel like it's so relevant. I was so miserable for so many years running my business thinking, gosh, I should be reading every single new study and every single book and everything. I was so miserable about it for so many years. And eventually I just got numb to it. And then years later, I finally had to understand it. It just kind of came to me. I was like, well, I spent so many years in the formative time, from 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, reading all this information. And then I had the opportunity to make it practical in the form of my business. And it's like, if the information's true, why do I need to know every single new study and every single little detail that comes out? Like, why would I put that pressure on myself? Wouldn't it make sense to just take the information that I know or believe to be true and just apply it and make it practical in the case of the business? And then the same thing kind of started to become true for me, on a personal, spiritual level. It's like, I love reading books because it's very intellectually stimulating. But to me, a lot of the time, it's like mental masturbation, to be honest. It's just like, oh, more information. Like, are you getting wiser? So
is your life getting better?
Yeah. Is your life getting better, for example? Do you feel happier? Do you feel deeper? Do you live deeper in your life? So that also started to blow my mind. And I was like, I'm just going to stop putting pressure on myself to read a book unless I really want to read a book. Like I was called, some people's skeptical of this kind of language, but I felt called
right.
and I'm even skeptical of it sometimes. Honestly, like I was a skeptic at one point anyway, to read The Alchemist or to reread The Alchemist. And it was touching. And I'm really happy I did, and that was nice. And, I read a book like the Shackleton Endurance. That's a great book. Like the story of Ernest Shackleton and his guys trying to cross Antarctica. You've heard of Ernest Shackleton? They were one of the voyages in the 1914 or something. They tried to cross Antarctica. It was like one of the first trans-Antarctic expeditions, supposedly. And their ship got stuck in the ice, crushed, sank, and they basically hauled 3 lifeboats across hundreds of miles of glacier or of the flows, the ice flows, almost lost men multiple times, even to like these sea lion things that tried to eat them. And they finally ended up, they got to a point where their navigator was a genius with his maps and a sextant. And he was able to say like, okay, we're this far from Elephant Island, this island, which is totally uninhabited way in the Arctic. And they went there and they then had to basically embark on, like everybody thought they were dead. So like 3 or 4 of them had to take the largest of their lifeboats and sail hundreds of miles across the Drake Passage in like a very small boat, which is like the most gnarly seas, like 60+ foot waves in the world, to this island, which is the southernmost whaling station like in the world, or at least close to them. At least at the time it was. It would be like me throwing a football and making it through like a hoop this big, like 5 miles away. I mean, it was like impossible. And they made it, but then they almost got destroyed on the side of the island because they came in with huge waves and everything. And then they ended up in a bay, but then they had to cross over these massive mountains that had never been traversed by humans ever. So they were already there, but it was like the final thing. And apparently like the guy who first saw them, the owner of the whaling station, like wept when he saw them because he realized like these guys had somehow survived. But then they had to try to break through the ice to get back to their men. It took them like 4 months. They had to petition like the Chilean government, the Argentine governments for an icebreaker. And those guys survived in like a Arctic winter Like it was crazy. And they didn't lose a single guy. It's the most miraculous story of endurance probably in human history, maybe like along with Spartan 300, but it's a great book. It's called Endurance. I mean, I kind of just shared the ending, but the ending is already known to people who are familiar with the story, but I already knew the ending. It was unbelievable. So anyway, humans are pretty cool. And I couldn't agree with you more strongly that belief is kind of everything.
It really is, man. It really is. I mean, I even see it appear in my life. I'm really excited for you just based on what you shared with your like previous stomach issues and coming full circle on like, this could be an element of my psyche. It probably is an element of my psyche to learn about German New Medicine. We were talking off camera about my 4.5 hour masterclass of German New Medicine because that's what that's all about. It's incredible. I have 2 more questions I want to touch on. One is, it should be a short answer, relatively speaking. I know y'all are developing new bulbs, which I'm so stoked for. What is the problem that you found with a lot of the quote unquote circadian bulbs that are on the market right now?
So first of all, they don't have near infrared. And if they do, it's an insignificant amount. There's literally a company that their name is based a play on the word of near infrared A. And we've opened up the bulb, measured it, and you get like an inch away from the bulb and it has virtually no near infrared.
And that's in their name. Their name is based on near infrared.
People don't know anything. It's crazy. So, I mean, I hate to say it, but it's true. So, we measure it and there's no near infrared as you get further and further away from the light source. Nothing that would be significant for a human. Now, who knows? Maybe the light we got was a dud, but I kind of doubt it. Anyway, so that's the first problem is that they don't have near infrared. So any light bulb which has no near infrared right away is out the window. And that's basically all of them. But if you want to go further, they have too much of the blue light in the HEVL range as well. So they don't properly eliminate the HEVL. And then finally, when they use blue light this is kind of the same as the previous one, but when they try to use the blue light in the good range, the good blue range to stimulate the circadian system, rather than targeting the specific wavelengths that are the good blue, they use the standard LED spike, which is right in between the bad blue and the good blue. So you're getting more of the retinally damaging wavelengths of light, which is especially problematic for kids with really translucent lenses. And it's not focused enough properly on the good blue light wavelengths. So that's really the main issue. They sometimes have good color rendering, sometimes not, hit or miss. And again, some of them are flicker free, some are not. So basically none of them hit the mark of near infrared, flicker-free, hormonally neutral, and low in HEVL of the bad blue light and high color rendering index. I basically just gave everybody the formula. But anyway, we spent a long time developing this.
It's going to take you a long time, even if you have that formula.
Yeah, you could try. I mean, try by all means. It'd be great to have some competition.
Seriously, like you want to have more people innovate and develop more of these things.
If I didn't have competition on the blue blocking glasses, I wouldn't have worked a quarter as hard as I did. Like I had some companies come on and were like sponsoring all the big podcasts early on. Who one time the founder of this other, who was like the largest competitor early on, he literally told me, he's like, yeah, we were so inspired by what you were doing. Like we kind of decided to follow, like he basically admitted that they basically copied us. And I'm like, I don't even care because like it motivated. If I didn't have you guys, I wouldn't have been so motivated, like Huberman releasing the same product as ours. I was like, that's the best compliment I could ever receive. Like the most famous public scientist in the world is publicly promoting this. Would have loved to do it with him, but would have loved doesn't always
a
work.
Collab. That's okay though. That's okay.
It's okay. It's all meant to be the way it's meant to be. Yeah. So it's been interesting. Our bulbs are really, really special. And, as I've shared, I'm running the business in a way as a lean startup. And what that means is like, it's lean thinking, but it's based on this book, The Lean Startup, which is worth touching on for a moment. This guy, Eric Ries, who wrote the book, he's a Silicon Valley guy. He had started some kind of company and they had spent so much money. This was around the dot-com bubble. They invested so much money in the product and all of these features, tons of investor money and huge staff and everything. And then the product launched and they found out that nobody even wanted the core product, much less all the features they had spent years and, millions of dollars maybe building. And then he went back in that terrible state, like let everybody down kind of thing, and studied this model called lean manufacturing from Japan. I think Toyota was kind of pioneering this. And from what I recall, they had, seen how much waste happens with automobile spare parts. Like they'll produce mass production runs of bumpers and, all this stuff, windshields and the rear view mirrors and whatnot, spare parts that cars need. Just kind of guessing like how many they're going to sell, but they don't even know how many cars they're going to sell. So it's like much less the spare parts. So Toyota did something like investing more into the machinery to be able to do smaller production runs and the systems to be able to kind of track more in real time, like how much is actually being utilized, and then to be able to kind of produce as needed. And then this guy decided to write a book called The Lean Startup, basically applying this thinking to a startup. And it's kind of like the scientific method applied to business. And so the Lean Startup basically says it's the core of it is what's called the build, measure, learn feedback loop. This is all in the book. Basically, it's the scientific method applied to business. So in science, you have a hypothesis and you attempt to disprove it. You're not trying to prove it. People don't really realize it. You're trying to falsify it. And the less you can falsify it, the more likely it's true. But you never know anything for sure with science, according to science itself. Interesting that just came full circle. I just realized by definition, science doesn't know anything ever. Interesting. And that's actually like in science. That's like what the textbooks teach. Right. Wow, that was good. So anyway, that was unintended. Maybe that's why I had to go down this tangent. But anyway, so you have a hypothesis and then you try to disprove it. So you create an experiment, right? And so in the build, measure, learn feedback loop, it's like, okay, I have this hypothesis. I'm going to come up with some sort of criteria, just like in science, that I'm going to measure. You don't want to cherry pick the data afterwards. You want to objectively from the beginning say, what am I going to do? And how am I going to measure it? The results, So then you build your experiment. And in the business world, it's called the minimum viable product. So you don't need to go out and take tons of investor money and all this. For me and my business, which I've already explained the story in detail now, the minimum viable product, after Luke asked me about the glasses and I realized, okay, this is great. I can sell him and that'll cover the cost of my first inventory purchase. I mean, I gotta go. I'm going to go give him a hug tomorrow and say, hey, dude, your first, $70 he paid for me to buy the equipment and stuff. Like I was just doing it at cost for him. It was like this celebrity. So, to buy the equipment, that really became like the whole business today. I had to take out of some savings and whatnot, but really that was the first seed. So kudos to Luke's story. Thanks, Luke.
Shout out to Luke.
And a really amazing guy. So the minimum viable product for me was a Google form. It was like, let me see if anybody in this community wants these glasses. And I didn't really set very clear criteria, but it was kind of like if enough people fill out the Google form and it's clear there's a demand, I'll move forward. So you measure. So I kind of measured like, okay, 50 some people in a couple of months, 2 months filled out this form. Like that's the same amount of revenue as I almost brought in from, pushing a lawnmower the entire summer. That's pretty good. And it wasn't nearly as hard work. It was kind of taking this specialized knowledge and kind of scaling it a little bit. And so then they say, okay, so once you've measured, you have to decide, do you pivot or persevere? So you change course or kind of stay the course and keep moving. And I kind of persevered. We had to pivot sometimes, but that's when you learn. And then you kind of just do it all over again. So let's see, where was I going with the lean startup here? Anyway, I actually don't even know. Lost the train of thought. But anyway, that's
what was it? You're talking about keeping the business lean.
Oh yeah, of course. Lighting you asked me about. So thank you very much. This is great. Keep this all in the podcast. I love it.
That's my job here. That's
no, I love this. So the lighting is something where, yeah, we could go out and like do all this crazy fundraising and everything, but I'm a big believer in the lean startup in the sense that like we're going to create simple products and they're not as simple as they could be because like we have a great business and we can invest more than the leanest startup would have to.
Yeah.
But we have 4 amazing products. So one is a night bulb with 3 different intensities of dimming. It's 1200 Kelvin. So it's very, very, very warm and it has near infrared. We call it non-melanopic, meaning it doesn't influence melanopsin.
Okay.
That's not the exact name of the product, but that's kind of the scientific category. So 3 intensities. So you can have 100%, like 40% or like lower 8%, something like that. So you can have, it's like a night light almost. So the product's called Lumios. So I was looking in the bulb one day and it just came to me, Lumios.
I love that name.
Yeah. So Lumios. So we have Lumios. I don't know if exactly at this moment of recording the exact final product names, but Lumios Night would be the product I just described. Lumios Core, like the main product, or maybe I'll call it Lumios Flow. Well, it has 4 different color temperatures. So you can go from like warm white to warmer white to even warmer white to super warm white, which is basically like candlelight at reduced levels of intensity. And so that's kind of like the classic bulb, which most people would want to have in their house. But then another really cool product is effectively a melanopic light, similar to our blue sync lens that I'm wearing now, but in a light form where it adds good blue light. And we spent so much time trying to explain to the product development teams over in Asia how to get this right to reduce, because they think we're crazy.
Yeah,
like they're just like, why? Like, who are these people and why do they want this? And that's the thing. That's why nobody else could do this.
Yeah.
It's been a labor of love, but we're like, no HEVL, get rid of the HEVL. They're like, why? We're like, because just get rid of it. So they just get rid of the HEVL. So we have so much of the good blue. So it's the only only circadian friendly artificial light that you can use to stimulate your circadian rhythm ever. So it's like, and we call it Lumiose Sky because the blue light, it's like a sky function. So then you can switch from the sky mode. You could turn it on in your bathroom, for example, 10, 20 minutes in the morning when you're getting started. And then it also has the warm white, which is the hormonally neutral light. The concept of hormonally neutral for lighting means it doesn't I might have said this earlier, but it doesn't jack up your cortisol during daytime, and it doesn't suppress the natural release of melatonin in the evening. That's our thesis behind everything we're doing with raw lighting. So it has the hormonally active. So this one function, Lumiose Sky, is not hormonally neutral. It does, but it's bio-individual. So you can choose to use it. And again, it doesn't have the other main negative side effect of the blue enriched modern human-centric lighting, which is not human-centric at all, which is that the blue light peak has so much of the damaging HEVL, which causes damage to the eyes, the retina, even skin. And they don't have near infrared. So we have the counterbalancing near infrared as well. So if we did have the HEVL, it would still be less bad than theirs. But so we have near infrared. So you have the sky function, so colder white, but without HEVL, stimulating blue. Then you have the warm white light. Then you have a warmer white. Then you have like the night bulb. So I think that's going to be the most popular because then you can have the stimulation if you want. But it wouldn't be something I would advise for we wouldn't advise it for kids for long periods of use because again, their lens is more sensitive and they should be more careful. So anyway, but it would be safe effectively because it has the near infrared and it doesn't have the HEVL.
So it's coming out this coming year though.
January, most likely.
Yes.
January, February.
Okay. Hopefully by the time this releases, it's out. I'm so stoked for that, man.
But anyway,
okay.
It's very exciting.
Yeah,
so,
it's amazing, man.
So that's where we're different from the other bulbs and where they've kind of failed.
That's epic, dude. That's epic. Okay. As a final question, as someone who is pretty nomadic, who's interested in circadian biology, interested in their light environment, what are some things that you do specifically to attune yourself while traveling? Because that's like your whole life is traveling.
It is. So pretty much almost everyone on my staff tells me that if they did what I do, they would die. And I think most people wouldn't be able to physically handle it. I have to think that that's somehow true because the only people who travel as much as me and some much more are rock stars on tour, but usually the tour doesn't last for 8 years.
And they're thriving on Coke.
Yeah,
and you're not.
There you go. For example, that's a good point. I didn't think about that. So you can disqualify these. Professional tennis players travel more than any other sport. And I've recently connected with a lot of them because one top player, Andrei Rublev, this frame I'm wearing is Tempest. It's a collaboration with him. He was as high as number 5 in the world last year, and he's somewhere around number 10 to 15 at the moment. But he's one of the best. He's been in the top 10 men's singles for 4 out of the last 5 years, if you look at week over week. So he's one of the best in the world consistently for the last half a decade. And so I connected with him because he was using our glasses and we met, we became buds, and he invited me so generously to all these different tournaments. And I just was like, okay, I'll come to Wimbledon. Why not? It's tennis is a really cool sport and I really love it. I have so much respect. It's a very classy game. And I started to play it as a result. But I realized, working with Andre and other players, a lot of the players struggle. I mean, Andre has been very open about his own challenges and the attempts to improve that. But a lot of players, they struggle because they're going through so much circadian disruption on such a regular basis. The only other sports that travel nearly as much are globally are Formula One and golf, which still is less generally less performance. Formula One's hardcore. Golf is pretty relaxed. You play during daytime. You're not playing late night matches like you are in tennis. F1's again, very hardcore, but there are fewer instances throughout the year. But then when you're on, and they also struggle and they have to be sharp. So I'm sharing all of this because I've seen that these people struggle. The people who travel out, like you said, the people on tour do coke, for example.
Maybe.
So maybe.
Allegedly.
Maybe. Yeah, allegedly. Not all. So I meditate, first of all. I think that's the most useful tool.
Yeah.
So meditating, and I'd like to meditate every day. I don't end up doing it every day, but working on that.
If you make your life a walking meditation, though.
I try that as well. Yeah, I do. I actually do because
you don't actually have to do the act of meditating. I find the more that you do the act of meditating, the more you're able to go without meditating for some time because you've made your life a walking meditation.
Yeah, precisely. And that's something, that even Joe Dispenza is sharing in his work. Just you can keep doing the walking meditation, the talking meditation, the podcasting meditation, So this is to me the most important tool because it is the light diet. It's cultivating your inner light. So really all the things I do are the steps of the light diet. So in the morning, practicing cultivating our inner light. I usually put it at the end of the list because it sounds nicest to close it all out. But in the day, it really happens first, ideally before sunrise. And then I believe, based on my limited knowledge of traditional Ayurvedic medicine, everything, it is optimal to wake up before sunrise, especially for men. Now, this is another non so PC thing to talk about, but the difference in male and female energy systems. Like according to traditional Ayurveda, it's good for women to relax and sleep longer and rest and take it easy. And it's great for men to be disciplined, and like men thrive through discipline and overcoming, and women thrive through relaxation. And we've got this totally backwards in our society now. But waking up early is really important for men in particular, according to Ayurveda, and meditating and doing spiritual practices before sunrise. Like I know if I wake up early, which requires going to sleep early, which requires getting off devices and stimulation at least an hour before bed, which for me, if I try to go to sleep by 9, that means stopping things by 8, which I do not always do, but I fortunately did it last night, which has helped this podcast episode.
You've been crushing this episode.
Past few nights before that, I was not fully nailing that. I was like working until I was too tired. And then it's like, it's not just the extra hour I stay awake, but the fact that I was pushing my brain to the last minute, I was so exhausted. And then I sleep 2 extra hours or maybe even more. So I realized, it's very nuanced, but this is all partially Ayurveda and largely based now in Western science and the research. So when you're working backwards, to fall asleep early so that you can wake up early, you want to remove the stimulation, which means even if you're wearing raw optic sunset lenses, you should not be on your devices, because even if you remove the stimulating blue wavelengths, all of the information on X or Instagram or whatever is not good. So at least an hour before bed, ideally even maybe 2 or 3, spend time with your loved ones, do something else, maybe watch a show, but not like a murder show, ideally, unless you want that in your consciousness while you're sleeping. I mean, up to you. Many people do, which is a bit strange, but I
can't even tolerate them anymore. I talk with my wife about that all the time now too. It's like, I, for some reason, cannot even sit through a murder show or like a horror movie.
My grandparents like watching it on public television. I'm like, come on, guys.
I can't
really?
do it.
Like I have nightmares,
Yeah.
So then prior to that, wearing raw optic sunset lenses, the red lenses from the time the sun sets until sleep allows you to start winding down. So it tells the brain that it's night. It removes the stimulating blue light. The brain and body start to relax. So I tell people you fall asleep or you relax more naturally in the evening, you fall asleep more easily, and you sleep more deeply with sunset lenses. And then you wake up in the morning feeling more well-rested and refreshed. So that's kind of the evening progression. And I do basically do these things every evening. Again, sometimes I work a little too late, but the best is like once it gets dark, I stop all device use and I maybe read a book or I just relax or something like this. Like I spend a lot of time on my own. So meditate sometimes, could meditate more. And then you wake up early, meditate in the morning. Let's see. I mean, I'm saying what I do and what people could do. And then watch the sunrise. So get morning sunlight or watch the sunrise. Like ideally when the sun rises, I don't do this every day, but again, I'd like to, but I do go out and get morning sunlight every day for 5 to 10 to 15 minutes. Ideally, I even go for a nice long walk at some point in the morning to really kick my system into gear. I use the blue sync lens as I feel I want to. It's not like you have to use it, but if I feel like I want a little bit of relief from the sun or a little bit of increased kind of stimulus from the light, then I will use blue sync, and it's very, very pleasant. A lot of people who wear it say it's like the most pleasant lens they've ever worn.
I can't wait to try it.
Yeah, we'll get you some. So then I just try to spend a good amount of time outdoors. The first time I met Dr. Wunsch, he told me that in general, he thinks everyone would benefit from at least 2 hours of unfiltered daylight outdoors, or at least natural daylight. Now, blue sync, again, wasn't invented at that time. So there wasn't a lens that could allow you to sort of enhance the melanopic effects of sunlight. So that you might even be able to compress that. But in general, I'd say get out for 2 hours.
Still something about getting on your skin though, too.
Yeah, of course. Getting it on your skin, going barefoot. So that's another kind of general piece of the light diet, connect to the earth. What else? I mean, I'm kind of answering it in generic terms of like the steps of the light diet, but this is actually what I do at a foundation. I eat very light. Like I actually, to each their own, like there's this huge movement of like, I want to be as buff as possible. I want my calves to be massive. I want my arms to be massive. My sense based on everything I've learned is that, and this was actually confirmed to me by a yogi I spoke to in Kriya Yoga, Yogananda's tradition and everything, like a practicing monk. I was at one of their ashrams once in Austria doing like a initiation, a whole thing, like a week-long retreat actually around Christmas going into 2024. And he told me, like we yogis, we concentrate our chi in our chakras so that we can basically raise our energy, something like this, to reach enlightenment. He didn't say it like that because he was very humble, but effectively that's it. And bodybuilders concentrate their chi in their muscles. Now, I do believe because this yogi friend of mine I mentioned earlier on who I met surfing is extremely ripped and extremely dialed in, like he's a whole different level of species almost, it seems. But I think a lot of the time people trade off, there's this concept of like the meathead, like they trade off their vital life force energy, their chi, to their muscles rather than to like their central nervous system. And which you can do by lifting weights all day long and taking a ton of creatine and doing all that stuff. And I don't think it's necessarily for the betterment unless you've already established a really strong foundation and then you're building outward from there. So that's just but I mentioned eating light because honestly, I do think one side effect of constantly being on planes, I mean, I've flown like 65,000 miles this year and I've been on like 60 something flights, I've been on planes for like 7 full days this year, like 7 days, 24 hours times like 6 or 7, and I almost don't believe it because it's like, it's like one 12, 13 hour, 14 flight here, another 15 hour flight there, 5 hours here, 2 hours there. Is it hard for you to
adjust at all? Like, do you get jet lag?
I do, because I wear sunset lenses in the evening and I wear blue sync in the morning. And I'm not joking. Like my scientific, Dr. Wunsch always tells me like, it takes a month to adjust. I'm like, doc, I just flew from Madrid to New York and I'm already sleeping on the right rhythm. Like, tell me how. I mean, I got to talk with him a bit more about that and understand it. But like, I adjust quickly in general. So what else am I doing? Yeah. So eating light, like I'm more and more personally inclined towards like plant-based diets, which most people in the health and wellness world think is ludicrous. I used to think that vegans were like child abusers, seriously. But personally, I felt good eating like quite light, but I'm not fully plant-based. Like I don't really like red meat. Just personally, I just lost my interest, but I do eat some chicken. I do eat some fish. I really like dairy products like yogurt and cheese.
There is some spiritual implication though to consuming flesh, I believe. And I say that as someone who does.
Yeah.
Like,
I really do think too.
that.
Well, according to, if we're going to talk about it, I mean, according to the Ayurvedic knowledge that I've been now exposed to, you're basically taking on more karma, the higher of a life form that you consume, whether it's a dolphin or an octopus or a cow or whatever, you're taking on more karma that you then have to burn through versus a fruit. And people like, the common carnivore argument is like, well, they have nervous system, or they have not nervous systems, but they're conscious too. And it's like, yeah, they are, but less conscious. It's like scales of consciousness, something like this. So I eat generally quite light. Like I try to eat just 2 meals per day in general. Like I'll have ideally like a late breakfast and an early dinner, maybe between 9 and 11, and then something between like 4 and 5. And that works pretty well for me. And if I'm going to eat heavier food, it's better to have it according to Ayurveda around midday when your digestive fire is the strongest. And traditional Chinese medicine, for the acupuncturists out there, it says the same thing. I think that's the lung time is around the midday, and it's when the digestive fire is the strongest. Lungs take in oxygen. Oxygen combines with, gosh, we didn't talk about so much, but we'll do another one.
That's all right.
But basically oxygen combines with hydrogen, which makes water and releases energy. Like, so the reaction, people don't know this, the chemical reaction that occurs in our mitochondria, they call it oxidative phosphorylation. It's literally the exact same thing as combustion in a fire, because a fire takes a hydrogen-based fuel source like wood. You put a spark, the spark causes hydrogens to break off from that fuel source, and then the hydrogens are free and they immediately react with oxygen in the air to make water. The water evaporates instantly because of all the heat or the energy from the reaction, but the water is made and the energy is what's released. And in our cells, it's the same thing. We consume hydrogen-based fuel, which is all fats and carbohydrates. They're hydrogen. We strip them off in the process of the Krebs cycle and, all the precursors to mitochondrial respiration, oxidative phosphorylation. When we're in, low oxygen states, then we use anaerobic respiration. So that's like fermentation, something like that. But normally now we're using oxygen. So we strip the hydrogens and react them with oxygen, but we basically arbitrage or steal all the energy in between on the mitochondrial respiratory proteins, the electron transport chain, and we make water. And the water actually hydrates our cells. It doesn't just evaporate like in a fire. And the release of energy is used to make ATP, to spin the ATPase and make the turbine. So anyway, there is something to be said for when Chinese medicine says the time of the lungs, and people are like, oh, that sounds really woo-woo. It's like, well, that's actually what's happening. Anyway, so I go into natural bodies of water whenever I can. Cold plunging or not so cold, but like lakes, rivers, springs, Barton Springs. I always stay right next to Barton Springs when I'm in Austin because I'm in that thing pretty much every single day, sometimes twice a day, even when it's cold. I think it's the best thing ever, going in the ocean. The other night when I was actually with Jono Jarecki in Florida in Delray Beach, visiting him after this conference we just did, Eudaimonia at West Palm Beach. It was amazing. And I was so tired after a 3-day event. It was like the first time we did a 3-day event. And then I really messed it up by staying up later when I should have been going to sleep earlier because my team, we were doing a shindig and live music and everything. And then I got locked out of my Airbnb because the code had auto adjusted. So then I had to go to a hotel. So it was like, I wasn't asleep till like 2 a.m. and I was wrecked after that. I needed that sleep more than any other sleep. It took me like 2 days to recover. But the first day after that, I was so tired. We were supposed to have dinner again with the team. I was like, oh my gosh, I'm going to die. I went to the ocean. I just knew I had to jump in. I jumped in, laid around. It was like sunset time, sat on the beach, and I came back feeling like $1,000,000. So, and I think I noticed the power of it because I was so beaten down at that time. Normally I'm not so, exhausted. So it doesn't seem like such a massive contrast, but the contrast was strong. So I get into natural bodies of water, lakes in Switzerland, oceans, Mediterranean Sea is my favorite sea. I love it in Albania, especially. And finally, I think the most important, which is a great place to kind of bring things full circle, is I do try to have like a very optimistic perspective. Like I sometimes start telling myself, gosh, if I only think about how much time I've traveled this year, I probably could just drop dead at any moment. Like sometimes I actually think that. I'm like, that's not really helping me. As soon as I shift my mindset into like, oh, well, I might have to go to South America for some business stuff coming up soon. So I'm like, that's a lot more travel. And the devil on my shoulder is like, you're going to die, and the angel's like, you're young and healthy and vibrant and you're going to be fine. In fact, you're going to have the best time of your life. And so I just try to lean into the inspiration. It's not always easy, especially when you're tired, but adhering to and this is a core place to tie it together, is adhering to these principles of what I call the light diet. So actually like wearing sunset lenses in the evening, or just if you don't want to buy the glasses, then turn off all your lights and use candles. Fine. I don't care. But avoid art. But the glasses happen to make it a lot easier. Just saying. So, use the lenses in the evening, get off the devices and the stimulation 1 hour at least before bed, go to sleep by like 9. And then you'll wake up earlier feeling better. And also this is a huge one. Other Ayurvedic wisdom that I've gotten from my wise teachers. Don't trust your mind in the evening or even like late in the day. Why? Because our for most mortal people, the nervous system is so fatigued after a certain point in the day, after 3, 4, 5 p.m. Like when do people usually get in like really severe arguments? Is it usually in the morning or in the evening? It's always at night. When do people kill people? When do people get into car accidents? It's almost always at night. This is in Ayurveda. It's known as tamasic time. It's the time of ignorance. So like the early morning hours are sattvic. As the sun comes up and the sun is bright and it's strong, it's rajasic time. So in Ayurveda, there's also 3 types of foods. There's sattvic, which are pure balancing foods. There are rajasic foods like caffeine and stimulants and things that lift you up. And then there are tamasic foods like meat and alcohol and things that bring you down. And there are 3 times of the day. The sattvic time is the early morning hours in the morning, which is so calm and peaceful. The rajasic time is the powerful time when the sun is strong. And the tamasic time is the later part of especially at night when ignorance prevails, the energy of ignorance prevails. So not really trusting the mind at night if it's trying to drive you crazy. And I used to like journal at night and try to solve all my life problems at night. And I ended up just more confused and more miserable. As soon as I started taking this advice to just like, no matter how stressed I am at night, and I'm not perfect about this, but in the context of arguing with someone or being reactive and responsive, it can be a lot harder to hold back. But in the context of like not listening to my own thinking, it's a lot easier for me now. And so I'll just like go to sleep. And there have been so many times, like even last night, where I go to sleep and I'm like, oh my gosh, how am I going to even manage? I have so many things to do. And it's like, it's impossible. And I wake up and it feels okay. Like it's at least manageable. You can think clearly. There have been times where I forgot what I was worrying about. I was like so concerned about something before bed and I couldn't even remember it. And I like never remembered. It like disappeared, So this is a really good piece of advice for everybody. It's like don't really trust your mind too much late in the day So this yogi friend of mine, he told me it took him 10 years of disciplined meditation, morning and evening, to get to a point where he feels about level, like he can kind of maintain some degree of that balance in the evening. But for most, let's say mortals of us who have a lot of work to do, it's just something worthy of consideration. And that applies also to like important meetings. Like people a lot of the time meet at night, but like we aren't necessarily in our best state to present our highest self late in the day, especially in the evening. And the other person might be more jaded by their own fatigue and their own stress, and they might not receive our ideas as well. It could lead to a totally different outcome from in the morning. And so this is just information for the intelligent mind that wants to apply it. If you have an important pitch to make somebody, better to do it early than it is to do it at night in general. Just give it a shot.
Good advice.
Take it or leave it. Yeah.
Good advice. Man, this has been an epic chat, dude.
I'm glad you like it.
Like, this is my first time meeting you in person. You're a super dope dude. It was awesome hanging out with you.
Bro.
Seriously,
I really
man.
appreciate it. Thank you so much.
Yeah. Anything else you want to share as we close up?
I just see this beautiful Jesus sitting cross-legged behind you. And I feel inclined to say that I think everybody would benefit from reading the Bible or pursuing any sort of other spiritual path with sincerity. I think it could really change people's lives. I really believe that. It really has my own. And I'd like to believe I'm not dogmatic, even if I might sound pretty convinced about certain things I share. But I think a lot of people are, unfortunately, like on a serious note, really, really struggling in their life. A lot of women who have been sold the lie of, playing around their whole 20s and 30s, and then they're single and they're upset that, they're on their own. And I just think, and this applies to a lot of men who also have just played the man whore part for a long time. I feel fortunate that, like, to a great extent, I've been somewhat protected from a lot of this, largely because, and maybe that's why my soul just told me to just keep moving, to not get stuck. Because there's a certain degree of attachment when you start getting into social circles and stuff. So maybe I was kind of running from that. But I hope that a lot of the struggles that people are seeing today from following this, like, I don't even know what it's called, this like neoliberal, super free-flowing, like do whatever brings you pleasure philosophy, realize that the way that they feel should probably cause them to challenge the things they've accepted and believed in their life. And I give huge credit to both all the great spiritual masters who have given us all this wisdom to, seriously be able to share, and people like Dr. Jordan Peterson, who's come out and like spent his life enduring. I can't even imagine the level of hatred and crap that people give him for trying to give, especially young men, a path towards self-ownership and happiness. So I feel as a ending note, it's really a serious thing. Although this is all a fun and loose conversation, there are, I think, stakes. There are real stakes and implications to these beliefs and their consequences when people accept the beliefs which are underpinned by evil.
Amen. Well said, man. Thank you so much for being here, bro. This is awesome.
My pleasure. Thanks for having me. Anytime.